extraordinary other, and I was the middle child in a typical nuclear family. My mom is Martha, my dad is Roger, and I have two siblings. My older brother Greg is big and strong like our dad, and my younger sister Joan is small like our mom. I stand out because I have sandy brown hair and a slender build. When Greg would tease me, Dad would just laugh and say I needed to be tougher. Life is never fair, he would always say. As we grew up, we did what families do, went on picnics and visited the park. I often received Greg's old clothes, even if they were too big. My mom bought me belts and suspenders to keep my clothes up, but I still felt different. Greg and Joan had new things, while I had to live with hand-me-downs. Another difference was that Dad seemed stricter with me than the others. Greg was just like him, and Joan was always his favorite. Dad even called me the mistake. During my teenage years, my family didn't seem to notice when I got left out. Mom sometimes worried, but Dad would just say his life isn't fair, and I would be left on my own. The good side of being alone was that I learned a lot. I studied hard and became interested in science and technology. Over the years, I saved enough money from my allowance and odd jobs to buy parts to build my own computer. I learned how things worked. My studies became my escape. I learned about physics, geography, biology, chemistry, history, and I even picked up English, German, and Spanish. I spent so much time in my room that I absorbed everything. I was a straight-A student, and my teachers praised me. Even if it felt like my parents didn't care, my mom would give me a small smile while Dad would just grunt. Greg made fun of my interests, even though he struggled in school. In the later years of high school, Greg became more physical with me, pretending it was brotherly love, and Dad seemed to support him. Joan laughed at my situation, but ignored me. One time, Mom found me trying to soothe a bruise on my side. She held the ice pack on it for a few minutes while telling me not to provoke Greg. But Mom, I don't do anything. I try to stay out of his way, but he always seems to hit me hard when I walk by. I complained. With how Dad supports this and how Greg acts towards me, it feels like I belong to the wrong family. Mom seemed like she wanted to say something, but stopped herself. Instead, she replied, I will talk to your father and brother about this. They may not understand, since I guess you're different from them. A few days later, Mom must have had that talk because Greg started coming into my room every few days when I was asleep and hitting me in the stomach. Dad never mentioned anything, but he always had a sneer and a smile that felt mixed. I often had marks under clothes that didn't fit well. I was careful not to let anyone at school see the effects of the hits until one day during gym class. While we were running, someone played a prank and threw a metal bar in my path. I tripped and fell, cutting my arm. I was sent to the medical bay where the nurse, Mrs. Erskine, asked me to take off my shirt to clean and bandage the cut. Harry, sweetie, it's all right, she said kindly. I've raised 3 sons, and you're not showing me anything I haven't seen before. We need to clean this to keep it from getting worse. After hesitating a moment, I took off my shirt, trying to hide the bruises Greg had given me just a few days earlier. After a few minutes, I relaxed, and even though my wound hurt a lot, she cleaned it up and put a tight bandage on it. When she finished, I turned to put my shirt back on, but Mrs. Erskine noticed a big bruise on my back. Harry, she exclaimed, are you okay? I tried to downplay it, knowing that in my family, they didn't like to talk about problems. I'm fine, Mrs. E. I must have tripped a few days ago and didn't realize I hurt myself. She didn't seem convinced, but kept quiet and sent me on my way. I didn't know it then, but she began to speak to the other teachers and said they should pay attention to me. An unexpected result of this was during my senior year when the teachers joined forces to support me without me knowing. They figured out that I wasn't facing any problems at school and assumed that it was something happening at home. However, they couldn't interfere directly without causing trouble or talking to me about it. Instead, they took action in a different way. Toward the end of the year, they helped me apply to several universities, especially to one a few hours away, to get me out of my home. They helped me choose a course of study, and I discovered that I wanted to major in chemistry, so my science teachers assisted me with a scholarship application. Taking a chance, my science teacher, Mr. Daniels, who I always got along with, reached out to my parents to set up a meeting about a scholarship. They came to the school a week before the submission date, and 5 of us were in the room. Mr. Daniels, the school principal, Mr. McDonald, my parents, and me. Mr. and Mrs. Other, I don't think you see how big this chance is for Harry. He is one of the brightest students we have seen recently, and he could get a full scholarship to go to university. Mr. Daniels had been explaining this to my parents for almost 20 minutes. That's nice. But I told you before, I am not spending money on his education. He needs a job and to learn his place in the world, my dad replied with a frown. Mr. Other, Mr. McDonald spoke up. What Mr. Daniels means is that the scholarship is fully funded. You won't need to pay anything. My dad was silent for a moment, but quickly found another reason to object. Well, the schools are all out of town, so he'll have nowhere to live, and I won't pay for that. We have a plan for that, Mr. Other, Mr. Daniels said. I have a cousin who owns a business close to the university. He is looking for someone to help organize his warehouse. It's not glamorous work, he laughed, but it pays enough for Harry to have a place to stay and cover some basic expenses like food and books. I looked at Mr. Daniels, puzzled, because he had told me earlier that I would be working on research in a lab that connected to my chemistry studies. He caught my eye, winked, and subtly shook his head. I understood the hint and said nothing. My dad thought it over. Well, as long as I don't have to pay and he learns about hard work and it gets him out of my house. Great, Mr. McDonald chimed in before my dad could change his mind. I have the paperwork ready for you to sign. It took about an hour, but eventually everything was signed, and we went home. I was surprised when Mr. Daniels pulled me out of class 2 weeks later and handed me a thick set of envelopes. You're all set. The admissions board has approved your scholarship, and my cousin Norman looks forward to meeting you over the holidays before university starts. Mr. Daniels, I don't know what to say. Just remember me when you reach your goals. He paused. Harry, you will do well in whatever you choose. You're smart, hardworking, and you think of others first. All the teachers at school have known for some time what was going on at home. I wanted to defend my family when he raised his hand and said, It's okay. You don't need to say anything. We understand and thought of a way to help one of our bright students. School ended for the year, as it does in Australia, and I found I finished 3rd overall. I could have tied for 1st if my parents had let me participate in 2 extra credit trips, but they said no again. After school closed, Mr. Daniels came to pick me up to show me my new job. On the way, he told me to call him Jack, since he was no longer my teacher. We drove to the next city, which took a little over an hour. He introduced me to Norman and helped me find an apartment. It was a great 3-day trip where I was able to talk to Jack and Norman like friends. They listened to me and explained my new responsibilities. Norman had put in a good word for me, and I had the option of 2 one-bedroom apartments between the school and my future job. I chose the one closer to work. It was on the 1st floor of an older but well-kept building. The landlord, a nice older man, told me to call him if I needed help. On our way back, Jack and I discussed what I would learn. I felt excited, thinking that there might be more to life than being overlooked at home. The night before I left, my mother came in with a dozen boxes to help me pack. Mom, I can't take all of this on the bus. It's fine, dear. I spoke to your father, and I'll take you and these boxes in his truck tomorrow. One trip, and you're moved. Mom looked emotional as she approached me and gave me a huge hug. But soon after, she broke down in tears. Oh, Harry, my precious Harry, you deserve so much more. I could not do much for you, but I have a gift for you. She left my room and returned with a small box. Inside was a lovely notebook and what seemed to be a fancy fountain pen. I planned to use the notebook to write down my ideas and discoveries in the future, and the pen would always be on my desk. Don't tell your father, but I wanted you to have something special just for you, she said, her voice softening as she looked at me. 2, to know how much I care about you. Then at last she left, and I could hear her sniffling. At dinner that night, not much was said. Joan said, "Don't be any more of a loser than you already are," looking at me with disdain before turning back to her phone. Dad sneered, "I'll make sure to find another big brother to help take care of you." I thought it was an empty threat since I doubted he knew anyone outside of our town. "And make sure you don't embarrass this family any more than you have." Mom remained quiet but looked at me with the saddest eyes I had ever seen. The other surprise I got that night came just before midnight when Greg came into my room and started to hit me. As usual, I didn't fight back, and he chuckled as he left, saying, "Just so you remember your place." I can't say I was upset to be leaving. The following year was wonderful. I began learning new chemistry ideas and how to make my own discoveries at university. When I wasn't studying, I was working with Norman, putting what I learned into action. I got to study as much as I wanted, and for once, I was earning my own money. Being away from my family for the first time felt freeing. If this was what freedom was, I enjoyed it. Jack also visited often, hanging out with Norman and me, and I thought he seemed to like spending time with me. In my mind, he became the big brother I always wished Greg had been. I saved a lot of money since I rarely went out, and when I had enough, Jack helped me pick out a car. We talked about girls, a subject I was too shy to approach, and just enjoyed each other's company. The only downside was that, once I got my car, I had to return to my parents for lunch one Sunday each month. These family gatherings were required, and Dad insisted I be there. Since I had moved out, Sunday lunches had become more lively. Without me around all the time, my parents and siblings welcomed a variety of guests each week. It was almost funny. My family seemed relieved with me gone. I noticed curious looks from everyone when I attended, even though my presence was expected. So, I sat quietly in the corner waiting for the afternoon to end, so I could return to my own life. Many people who worked for Dad were usually there, and I didn't like going alone and sharing the room with them. But as the obedient son, I complied. During this early time away, while learning and studying, I made an important discovery. I developed a new chemical formula that increased the strength and durability of certain plastics. However, when a particular common compound was added, the plastic would break down into its basic parts in just a few days. When I shared my discoveries with Norman at work, he was amazed. "You're incredible. This could change how we use plastics everywhere and help the environment." In the following week, we worked in the lab and kept showing that my formula was effective. By the end of that week, we were in his office when Jack came in after school. We filled him in on what was happening. "Harry, Norman and I have some important things to discuss with you. If we handle this the right way, your discovery could make you well known." In the weeks that followed, Jack and Norman guided me through the steps to apply for a patent, so my discovery would officially belong to me. I had just turned 18 before school ended, so fortunately, I didn't need to involve my parents. Jack also helped me strike a deal with Norman to start a new business to produce the plastic compound. For his help, Jack received a small share of the business. Over the next 6 months, I went from being a university student on a tight budget to earning as much as top management consultants do in a year. I still did not have much of a social life, only going to university, working, and sometimes visiting my parents. But I did treat myself a little. First, I took out a loan to buy an apartment instead of renting. As usual, Jack helped me find a place, and we went through the steps together. Since it was a bit far to walk, I needed a good car rather than my old 1982 green Mazda 323, which was always breaking down. While we were looking around, I saw her and instantly fell in love. She was a second-hand 2008 V8 GT Mustang in great shape with low mileage and an upgraded suspension. Though I had to pay a bit more for insurance since I was under 25, it was worth it. When I got in and started her up, she ran beautifully and was always ready for a drive. Most Saturday afternoons, you could find me in the parking lot, cleaning and shining her up for my next ride. I also started to change my personal style a bit. I bought clothes that actually fit and began to see myself as more than just the nerdy younger brother everyone picked on. The next time, I visited my parents for lunch. I had the best drive, enjoying the Mustang on the highway and catching a few eyes as I pulled into their driveway. A V8 isn't exactly quiet, so a few people came out to see what the noise was, including my sister Joan. "Hey, friend, this is a private family gathering invite," she started, then paused as she looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time. "Hey, sis, it's just your goofy older brother back for lunch." She was a bit speechless. However, a couple of her friends came over to check out the car and ask who I was. They couldn't believe I was Joan's older brother or that I owned such a nice car. It felt good to be in the spotlight for once. I couldn't help but smile. Inside, my mother looked at me with joy, almost in tears when she saw my new clothes and smile. She gave me a warm hug. Dad and Greg looked at me with disapproval. Dad seemed upset, and Greg looked angry. After that, my father, brother, and sister mostly stayed quiet around me, only making a few snarky comments. But they listened to everything I said. Mom wanted all the details. "No, Mom, I'm still your Harry. I've just had some good luck for once." Since she hugged me, she hardly left me alone. She wanted to know about how I changed. "A few months ago, I found a formula that will make a big difference. Jack and Norman have helped me with a patent, which means people will pay me to use my formula." Mom was amazed. But that's not all. Norman and I started a new company to produce the products my patent protects, and he gave me a 30% share in the company. He has 30% too. We also gave Jack a 1% share, and some investors have the other 39%, so it looks like it's going to be a big success. Dad frowned. I could tell he wanted to say something, but stayed quiet. For the first time, Greg had no words for me. Right now, I'm only earning a little, but in a few years, I think I could be worth a lot. Plus, I get to travel to cool places for research. I had left my family speechless, and they had nothing to say. It wasn't like the praise I got from Jack, but it wasn't the usual insults either. That week, I returned to work and study feeling happy, and I couldn't stop smiling. Every month, I joined my parents for lunch, and it felt different. I still wasn't fully included. Joan, Greg, and Dad didn't have much time for me, but Mom and a few family friends seemed interested in what I was doing. One Sunday, when I showed up, Mom looked nervous. I hugged her and nodded at my siblings and Dad without much warmth. Then I went to greet the day's guests. As I mentioned earlier, Mom and Dad often had different visitors on Sundays, and today was no different. I mingled for a bit, grabbed a plate of food, and sat down in my usual spot to enjoy my BBQ sausages, potato salad, and crusty bread rolls while I watched the others. Although I wasn't as shy as before, I still found it hard to talk to this group, especially the ones my parents invited. "Hi, can I sit here?" It felt like I had heard a beautiful voice. I looked up, and there she was. If I thought my Mustang was special, the girl in front of me made it seem ordinary. She was tall and slim, almost 6 feet tall, with long, soft brown hair that fell almost to her waist. She had a nice figure that fit her frame well, with a small waist and jeans that looked good on her. Her face was charming, with big brown eyes, a little nose, and soft lips. She wore large glasses, which suited her. I realized she had spoken to me a moment ago. "Ah, sorry." She giggled, as if she knew I had been staring. "Can I sit here? I want to eat." "Sure. I'm Harry." Diana. In the next hour, we talked about everything from the latest movies and music we liked to my chemistry studies and cars, like my Mustang. Diana was in college, studying to become a counselor. She loved dogs, preferred sci-fi movies, and enjoyed playing video games. Surprisingly, she lived about half an hour out of town, which was on my way back home. By the time I had to leave, I really liked her. We were still talking when my mom came looking for me. "Harry?" "Yes, Mom?" She found me and came over, noticing Diana. She paused for a moment. "Diana, how are you?" They greeted each other warmly. It turned out Diana had recently worked with my dad, which is how she knew my family. "Harry, could you help me out? Diana's ride had to leave early because of a family matter, and since you're going past her house, could you drop her off?" "Of course, Mom, if Diana doesn't mind riding with me." She smiled and touched my arm. "I'd love to, Harry." Mom looked relieved. I guess she was glad she didn't have to find someone else to help. 20 minutes later, I was ready to go, and Diana happily joined me. I said goodbye to Mom with a hug and waved to Dad. For the first time, he smiled back at me. That felt different. Diana liked the ride in my Mustang, and we kept chatting on the way to her place. She led me to a small apartment complex, similar to where I had lived when I first moved out of my parents' house. It's not fancy. I share a 3-bedroom flat with 2 girls, and we all manage together. I wouldn't judge. I just moved from a similar place, just 1 bedroom and no roommates. She looked at me as if she wanted to say more while we sat in my car. "I had a good time this afternoon. Generally, your family doesn't see you in the best light, but today I noticed someone who really cares about his family. Even with the distance between you, you came anyway." "Diana, that was one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me." There was a quiet moment as our chat slowed down for the first time in hours. We both realized Diana should go inside, but she was unsure. "Diana?" "Yes?" I wanted to ask her out, but I didn't know how. I had never really liked a girl before, and no girl had ever seemed interested in me. "Next Friday," she said. "Next Friday?" "Yes, Harry. You were trying to ask me to go see the new Marvel movie Next Friday, right?" she said, looking at the dashboard of my car, blushing a little and giving me the chance I had hoped for all evening. "Yes, Friday." We exchanged numbers and emails. I wanted to give her a goodnight kiss, but I settled for an awkward hug instead. As I drove home, I couldn't sleep at all, but I felt really happy at my lecture in the morning and at work in the afternoon. After a couple of hours, Norman pulled me aside. "Harry, can I assume you have met someone?" I felt myself blush and just spoke out. "Yeah, Norman. She's beautiful. I met her at my parents' house. Her name is Diana. She's studying in college and she lives not too far away. We're going to see a movie on Friday night." Norman thought it was sweet and kept mentioning it as puppy love for the rest of the week. Still, He kept me focused. Mistakes in the lab could be very expensive, and my work needed to be done carefully. Diana and I talked on the phone a few times that week, and when Friday afternoon came, I was really nervous. So I called Jack. He had spoken with Norman, so he understood what I was feeling. For the first 10 minutes, I told him all about Diana and our talks, expressing my worries about messing up my first date. He laughed. "It's okay, Harry. Being a bit nervous shows you like her. Since you're going to a movie, it won't be too awkward. You'll spend much of the time watching the film. Wear those nice dark blue jeans, the white shirt, and the white sneakers we bought you. Don't forget to brush your teeth and wear deodorant. Just be yourself. You'll be fine." "But I'm not charming." "Harry, you might not see it, but girls notice you all the time. You just don't realize it. Just yesterday, some of the lab tech girls were waiting over you as you walked around the lab. With your new style, driving a Mustang, and the confidence you show in your work, trust me, people notice you. It seems like Diana has noticed and wants to make her feelings clear before someone else does." That thought made me feel more nervous. That night, as planned, I picked Diana up at 7. We went straight to the movies for the 7:30 show. We both really liked the film. Marvel does a great job with the story and special effects. This movie was funny and we laughed a lot. In one funny scene, the main character got caught in a silly situation before he could turn invisible, and Diana grabbed my hand because she was laughing so hard. When the scene ended, she kept holding my hand. I didn't mind at all. I think we might need to watch the movie again because I was a bit distracted by Diana holding my hand. After the movie, still holding hands, we walked to a cafe outside the cinema. Diana pulled me over, and we sat down to order Italian hot chocolates. If you haven't tried one, you're missing out. They're amazing. Imagine a thick, warm chocolate drink so rich that you can stand a spoon in it. We started by talking about the movie, then moved on to our hopes for the future, our jobs, and my car. I nervously complimented her on how lovely she looked in dark jeans and a light blue blouse. She had her hair nicely done and was wearing thin-framed glasses that suited her well. What made my evening special was finding out that we shared a love for people watching. Have you ever just sat and observed the people around you, noticing how they move and react to each other? We discovered that we enjoyed watching people and creating silly stories about them. For example, we imagined one couple were spies trying to gather secrets about our little town. Another older couple seemed to be rushing back to their home before the deadline hit, while a young couple walked hand in hand, sharing kisses and living their own love story. We laughed and joked, and I felt we had a wonderful evening together. After such a nice time, I didn't want to go home, but it was getting late, so we drove back to her place. Once we arrived, I got out, walked around, and opened her door. She stepped out and hugged me, then, to my surprise, she gave me a quick kiss on the lips. It was unexpected but delightful. Diana giggled and took a step back. "Harry, next Friday." "Yes?" "You're taking me out next Friday." "Oh, yes, I've got it. Nothing could keep me away." She laughed, instantly getting the joke. For the next few months, we saw each other almost every weekend, and even a few evenings during the week. We spent a lot of time talking, holding hands, and sharing sweet kisses. I met her flatmate, Cindy, who was a bit older. She was blonde and well put together, but dressed modestly, while Dawn, a quiet brunette, mostly kept to herself. I introduced Diana to Norman, showed her around the office, and met some of the lab team. I noticed a few girls looked at us a little longer than usual as I introduced Diana. Maybe Norman was right, and Diana was making her presence known. We often traveled together. She had an old Datsun, so we spent time in my Mustang. I bought us matching aviator sunglasses, with hers being prescription. Diana felt a bit confused and guilty about the cost, which was nearly $300. However, I was starting to really like her and wanted to treat her a little. "Diana, let me buy these for you. What most people don't know is that I have some savings from my patents and the business that Norman and I have. Getting you some sunglasses won't hurt my wallet." We did look good in our matching aviators getting out of the Mustang, if I do say so myself. We had been spending time together for almost 2 months and really enjoying each other's company when things changed again. It was a Sunday, different from our usual Saturday lunches at my parents' house. We were sitting in our usual corner away from the crowd, enjoying our favorite hobby of people watching. While snacking, Greg came over waving a newspaper in front of us, trying to grab our attention because he thought he had something that would embarrass me. "Hey, look at this," he said, waving the paper at me. "It must be wrong because you are a mistake." He laughed at his poor joke, but Deanna found it amusing. She took the page from him, frowned for a moment while reading, and then brightened up, winking at me. "This could be interesting. Greg, this newspaper article you're talking about, thinking it would embarrass your brother," she swatted the page with her hand, "is actually part of a bigger piece that New Business Magazine is doing on a young entrepreneur gaining attention worldwide. So, why would the mistake be mentioned? Did he mess up? So, the paper put his picture in to point out his silliness?" He laughed at his own joke, but the atmosphere had changed, and I could tell that others didn't find it funny. They seemed to sense this was not going to go well for Greg. I sat quietly, but a big smile was spreading across my face. "Actually," she paused for a moment, "Harry is the star of not just the newspaper, but the whole article. I was there when they came to his office for an interview. Felt a little silly when they called him the hottest young entrepreneur, but I was proud." Her excitement grew. "And what I think is really cool is that Harry, my boyfriend," she almost shouted his name, "he's being recognized not just for his breakthroughs in science, but also for building a company worth over $10 million in less than a year." Everyone froze. It was like their mouths dropped open. Greg looked confused. My mother wore a mix of shock and pride, while my father just stared. The family friends were looking at me as if they were trying to understand everything they had just learned. Diana had a huge, satisfied grin on her face. I felt stunned. My smile from seeing Greg's embarrassment quickly changed to surprise. I had just been introduced as someone's boyfriend. It took a moment for everyone to take it all in. In the middle of the confusion, Diana looked at me and smiled, adjusting her glasses. She seemed like the smartest person in the room at that moment. Then, all eyes were on me as everyone wanted to know more about the article. Finally, someone grabbed the newspaper and read it out loud, and the questions began. I explained how my work on recycling plastic was gaining attention. The business that Norman and I were starting was attracting interest. Big companies were eager to buy our product to see if it worked as promised. I knew that if it did, we would need to grow our operations in many countries. The questions kept coming that afternoon. Everyone wanted to know about my earnings, if I would become famous, and if there was a way for them to join my business. My family reacted differently. When I mentioned the money and opportunities, they all seemed excited. But when I said that investments would come later and that jobs were only for those trained in the field, their faces fell. My dad, in particular, went from looking surprised to his usual frown. I think he felt entitled to my success just because he was my father. The funny part was that Joan suddenly started paying attention to me. Maybe she thought I could help her out since she was my sister. Honestly, while I was open to helping family, I wasn't eager to give them anything. They had treated me poorly while I was growing up. They weren't struggling financially because of Dad's construction business, so I thought they could keep their money, and I would keep mine. That afternoon, had a few important moments. The first was when the excitement settled down, and Diana sat on my lap and gave me a big kiss. It wasn't like the quick pecks we usually shared. It felt more special, and I felt a rush when our lips met. After she pulled back, she kept her arm around my neck and looked into my eyes with a gaze that made my heart race. I was only 19, and Diana was just a few months younger than me. It was my first time being this close with a girl, and I was falling for her. "I'm your boyfriend, right?" I asked. "Yes, silly," she replied, looking back at me. "You are my boyfriend, and I'm your girlfriend." I smiled up at her big brown eyes and leaned in for another kiss. It was only my second real kiss, and I loved it. From that moment on, whenever Diana and I were together, there was always a part of us touching. Something else important happened that afternoon, shortly before Diana and I left. Everyone helped clean up. Usually the guys took care of the dishes and trash. I often wiped down the tables, and today was no different. Diana had gone to help with the dishwasher, and when I walked in, I saw Mom, Dad, and Greg talking to her. She seemed a bit flustered and caught my eye but didn't say anything. When I approached, Mom and Diana looked at me. Then Dad and Greg walked away. I led Diana to a quiet corner of the room. "What's wrong, Di?" I asked softly. She hesitated for a moment, then looked deeply into my eyes. "Nothing you need to worry about right now." "But you seem worried. Did my parents say something that upset you?" She paused again, then nodded. After a moment of thought, she looked down at her hands and spoke. "They didn't like it when I mentioned your success, and they thought I embarrassed Greg. They don't see you the same way I do. To them, you're not successful. If you were to be successful, they want it to be on their own terms. I think Roger believes he should manage your money." I frowned. Well, Greg brought this on himself. He should have thought before saying anything. He always calls me the mistake, since Mom and Dad didn't expect me while he and Joan were planned. He has never liked it when I was in the spotlight. "Not only did you share the articles about the business that Norman and I are building, but you also introduced yourself as my girlfriend." She turned red with embarrassment. I took her hand and kissed it. "I know my dad thinks I should credit him for my success and let him manage my money, but that will never happen. Besides Jack and Norman, no one showed interest in me or my achievements until you came along. Now, I have the challenge of taking care of someone I really care about. So I'm going to work hard to be the boyfriend you deserve." "Oh, Harry," she said, falling into my lap as she pushed me back onto the couch. Mom watched from the kitchen, but didn't say anything. Sitting on my lap, Diana wrapped her arms around me and rested her head against my chest. She might have shed a few tears. I wasn't sure. The next few months felt like a dream. Diana and I spent as much time together as we could. She started coming over to my place more often, and we shared some wonderful moments together. I noticed she sometimes dressed differently, and while I was tempted to go further, I respected her boundaries. Kissing her was exciting, and we became closer. I felt we were on the edge of something significant, and while I sensed that intimacy was in our future, we decided to take it slow. On the business side, things were getting busy. The plastic materials we were making were in high demand, and I needed to travel often. Many companies wanted to see me, the young inventor, in person. Some trips were within the country, but others were abroad. Norman usually joined me, and we hired a PR firm to send consultants along. Big companies were eager to meet with us, and I enjoyed dining at nice restaurants. I also stayed in comfortable hotels, all paid for by the clients. During meetings, I explained our patented process and showed how our products worked in manufacturing with engaging presentations. Each meeting went well, and Norman was pleased because everyone wanted to place orders. I always looked forward to coming home because I missed Diana. While I was away, we tried to have video calls every few days, and I could tell she missed me just as much as I missed her. I took many pictures of the cities I visited, and she loved seeing the hotel rooms I stayed in. Diana had never traveled much, so having a boyfriend who did made her feel excited and a bit sad. I hoped that someday we could travel together. Because of my travels, we missed 3 months of family gatherings. Diana said she would only go if I was there. I sensed something deeper. We were always invited, but if I couldn't make it, Diana would find a reason not to go. One exciting part of my trips was that our investment team helped us open new factories in 3 different countries. This greatly expanded our business. When we returned home from the trip that secured our 3rd site, Norman and I, along with our senior team, worked really hard for 2 weeks straight, without any days off, even on the weekends. It was a busy time, but we all knew that if we set everything up properly, it would be worth it. We planned for our main office to be the research center, while our overseas locations would produce our products for local markets. This way, we could control things better and respond to local needs instead of shipping everything globally. During this busy time, Diana often brought me lunch and sometimes sat with me in my office or in the company lunchroom. Unfortunately, we didn't see each other much, even after we set up the management structure in those first 2 weeks. I still worked long hours, sometimes up to 20 hours a day. By the end of the 3rd week since I got back, Diana and I hadn't even gone out on a date. She finally decided she wanted to change that and spoke to Norman about giving me Friday night and Saturday off. She didn't tell me herself. Norman was the one who broke the news, and he laughed when I initially protested. "Harry, that girl really cares about you. She's been trying to see you every day since we got back. You need to spend time with Diana. She knows you're busy, but she also needs to know she matters to you. Just take the time off and enjoy the evening and tomorrow with her. You work harder than anyone, and the job will still be here when you return," he said with a playful smile. "And don't forget to share some of the gifts you got for her. Let her know how special she is to you." That evening, I planned to do just that. I let Diana know I would be home early and told her when to meet me at my apartment. When she arrived that evening, she melted into my arms and kissed me like it was the most important thing in the world. "I've missed you so much. Lunch at your office just isn't enough." She pulled back, looking excited. "So, where are we going tonight?" "Sydney." "Sydney? Where's that?" I smiled. "You know, Sydney the city, in Australia." I should have mentioned it earlier, but we live in Melbourne, which is also in Australia. A trip to Sydney was something we had never done together. She looked at me, and I could see her excitement build at the thought of a trip. Just the 2 of us. "Di, I've missed you so much. I like our lunch visits, but I really just want some time together, just you and me." I must have said the right thing, because then my beautiful girlfriend started kissing me all over. "When are we leaving?" "Now." "But Harry, I can't. I don't have any clothes." I brought out a packed suitcase from behind the couch. "I got this for you while I was traveling and stopped by your place this afternoon. I asked Cindy, one of your flatmates, to pack you a few things." She looked amazed, her eyes shining with love. I continued, "I got it for you, hoping you could travel with me sometimes when I go away. I missed you so much that Norman had to talk me out of coming home early twice on my last trip." I took a deep breath and looked at her. "Di, I have to tell you, I love you. I looked down at my feet. I stayed there for a moment staring at my feet. She didn't respond right away, and I worried that I had said the wrong thing and would have to go to Sydney alone. Slowly, I looked up at Diana, and she had a big smile on her face. She raised her hand to touch my cheek, a tear in her eye. Harry, I love you too. When we kissed, it started gently, with our arms around each other, our lips softly touching. I could feel warm tears on my cheek. In that moment, I felt as if I was floating, just like during our first kiss, many months ago. I knew she loved me just as much as I loved her. We need to go. I've planned everything for the next few days, just you, me, and nothing else. We took an Uber to the airport and boarded the 1-hour flight to Sydney. We sat in business class, and the flight attendant brought us some drinks. We shared a toast, enjoying the moment together. It was Diana's first time on a plane, and she was curious about everything taking off and landing, looking out the window, even visiting the restroom. A car was waiting for us when we got off the plane. The driver, who was ours for the trip, helped with our bags and drove us into the city. He dropped us off at Darling Harbor, where we had dinner at a nice restaurant with stunning views. Diana was always smiling. We tried some different foods, had a couple of drinks, and had a good time. After dinner, we walked along the harbor, holding hands as we enjoyed the sights. Harry? She paused as we watched a ferry dock and its passengers get off. I sensed this was going to be an important conversation. Yes, my love, she sighed. I love hearing you say that, but I feel like I don't deserve it. We walked to a bench by the water and sat down. This was going to be serious. Harry, I usually don't talk much about my past. It wasn't very happy. Both of my parents are gone and I have no siblings. Until a year before I turned 18, I was in the care of the state, and that time was hard for me. I nodded. I had never pressed her about it since she usually changed the subject quickly when I tried. She continued. There are many tough things in my past. I was made to do things I didn't want to do, and that still hurts me. Tears were forming in her eyes. Harry, you are my first love, the first person I've cared about deeply. When I'm with you, I feel valued, and I hope that the dark parts of my past won't define my future. But I don't think I deserve your love. Her tears fell as she spoke. You are the kindest and most honest man I know. You give me so much, this trip included. I never expected anything like this. I was happy just being with you in our little town. But you still make time for me, even though you have such a bright future ahead. But I feel broken and unworthy of you. I could tell she wanted to say more, so I encouraged her gently. Diana, it's okay. I understand you don't want to discuss your past. I know there are some dark things there, and that's why I never pushed you. But everything you've overcome has shaped you into the woman I love. We've known each other for over a year, and have been together almost that long. I promise there's nothing you could tell me that would change how I feel about you. If you need help with anything, I'm here for you. I love you, Diana Brown, completely and truly. She started to cry even more. I pulled her close and leaned in to kiss her to show my support, but she stepped back, anger showing in her eyes. No, Harry, my wonderful, amazing Harry, I don't deserve your love. I'm not perfect, she sobbed. I was starting to understand what she was trying to express. Di, it's all right. No, it's not, Harry. I feel broken and unclean. I can't give you what I really want, she said, almost collapsing to the ground, quietly sobbing. I'm not pure. Now I realized why she was upset. She didn't want to discuss something from her past. I had never been in a relationship before her, so I had not experienced those things. I sat down on the ground beside her and wrapped my arm around her as she cried. I thought about what she said as she let out deep sobs, like someone who felt they had lost something very important. People walked by, some offering to help, while most just looked at us but didn't stop. Eventually, I helped her back to her seat. Diana, from the first moment I saw you, I was captivated. You know, I never really had friends. My family made sure of that and often treated me poorly. My sister ignored me and my older brother bullied me. My dad looked down on me, and my mom never stood up for me. She looked at me, clearly worried. Whenever the family went out, they preferred to leave me at home. They wouldn't spend on me if they didn't have to. I only got my brother's old clothes and had to do more chores than my siblings for less pocket money. If I didn't do things right, my father punished me. It hurt for days. I could see mercy and a bit of anger in Diana's eyes as I spoke. I've never told anyone this before. I never trusted anyone enough to share the truth. Even when people got close to knowing, I would defend my family, and I don't even know why. Dee, you think I would turn away from you because of what you shared. But I love you even more now. You took a risk by opening up to me, even if you weren't ready to say everything. I trust you, and I understand that you have a past. I was unaware before you told me, but I know that in real life, people our age have different experiences. I love you, Diana, and what you shared doesn't change that. We are here together this weekend because of my feelings for you. I'm not going anywhere, and I really hope you'll stay here with me for a long time. My words didn't seem to matter to her, and they brought on a new round of tears. She held me tightly and whispered, "It's not fair. I don't deserve you," along with "I love you" for about another half hour. It felt like we were in our own little world, where nothing else was important as we embraced. When we finally stood up, it was hard to imagine being apart. She pulled out some tissues from her purse to dry her tears, and we walked to a restroom so she could touch up her makeup. I thought she looked beautiful, but she wanted to make sure she didn't look red and blotchy. Once she felt better and came out, we continued our walk along the harbor boardwalk and found a cozy gelato shop. We enjoyed a cup of cookies and cream together. It was getting late, around 11 at night, and I felt it was time for us to head inside. I took out my phone and called our driver. I had booked a 3-bedroom suite at a nice hotel near the famous Sydney Opera House. The view overlooked the water and included the Sydney Harbor Bridge and the Opera House. As we entered the suite, we were both amazed by the view. We checked out all the rooms, then sat down on the couch in the main room. I cherished every moment I spent with her, feeling a deep connection between us. I knew we would have to discuss sleeping arrangements soon, but Diana spoke up first. "Harry, is it okay if we sleep in the same bed tonight? I've had such an incredible night, both happy and sad, and I just want you to hold me while I sleep. I want to feel safe with the man I love." I hesitated for just a moment, not wanting to deny her request. I wouldn't have it any other way. We moved to the large master bedroom. Our suitcases were already there, as our driver had assumed we would be staying together. I smiled at the thought of being next to the person I cared about most. Diana took a few items from her bag, went into the bathroom, and blew me a kiss as she closed the door. I changed into some comfortable boxers and climbed into the bed. It felt amazing. In my work, I've stayed in many nice hotel rooms, but what often irritates me about hotel beds is that many claim to have a king-sized bed, but it's really just 2 twin beds pushed together. This bed, however, was a real king-sized mattress, dressed in soft cotton sheets that felt fresh and luxurious. In the softly lit room, I was sorting through the pillows, each with a different feel, some big and fluffy, others firm and sturdy. I was still figuring out which one felt best when the door opened, and I turned my attention away from the pillows. There she was, the woman I cared for deeply, standing in the doorway, framed by the glow from the lamps. She had a warm smile, her presence calming and familiar. She wore a simple nightgown that fell just above her knees. Her gentle demeanor shone through, and her natural beauty made my heart race. Her hair was loosely held back, and she looked over at me, her eyes sparkling with a quiet excitement. She took a playful pose in the doorway. "Like what you see," she teased. I found myself lost for words, caught up in the warmth and charm she brought with her. She laughed softly and slipped into bed beside me, where we shared a gentle embrace. Our closeness grew as we held each other, finding comfort in the moment. We exchanged soft kisses, and I felt at ease, wrapped in a sense of trust and safety. As we lay there together, our connection deepened, not through words, but in the quiet, unspoken bond we shared. She looked into my eyes, her expression filled with care. "Do you trust me?" she whispered softly. "With everything," I replied. She smiled, setting her glasses on the nightstand. The warmth in her gaze held a promise, a moment where everything felt right. We lay together, content in each other's presence, letting the world fade away as we drifted into peaceful rest. Harry looked down, feeling a mix of vulnerability and trust in the closeness he shared with Diana. She took his hand, holding it warmly, her eyes filled with affection and sincerity. There was a gentle understanding between them that didn't need words. "Harry, you're perfect just as you are," she whispered softly, looking at him with a warm, reassuring smile. The moment was tender, filled with quiet respect and admiration. She squeezed his hand, letting him know she was there, fully present and supportive. As they lay close, their hands intertwined, Diana rested her head on his chest, breathing calmly as they simply enjoyed the peaceful quiet. They both felt a sense of wholeness in that shared silence, the comfort of knowing they were truly accepted and valued by each other. Harry, feeling relaxed, wrapped his arm around her, drawing her closer. Their bond grew deeper in those small gestures, as they exchanged a few gentle, warm kisses and rested beside each other, letting the quiet speak for them. Finally, they fell into a peaceful sleep, content in the simple beauty of the moment, both feeling safe and understood. Diana and I shared a moment of closeness that felt entirely new to me. Her gaze was warm and reassuring as she leaned in and asked softly, "Are you all right?" I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "That was absolutely incredible. I've never felt anything like it." She seemed pleased, and I could tell she was proud of the bond we were building together, a moment that felt special and just ours. "My turn," I said playfully. "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied, her voice filled with excitement. I took my time, focusing on her with gentle care. I brushed my hands across her shoulders and arms, letting her know she was cherished. I softly kissed her neck, feeling her relax as we shared the quiet intimacy between us. Our connection grew as we lay close, finding comfort in the warmth of each other's presence. As we continued to be there for one another, I held her, tracing gentle patterns along her back, sensing her joy and peace. Each small gesture felt meaningful, and we found ourselves simply enjoying the closeness, wrapped in a feeling of genuine connection. Finally, we both settled back, content and calm, drifting off with the comfort of each other's company. It was a night defined not by words, but by a shared understanding that we were there for one another, completely and without reservation. I gently held Diana close, showing care and tenderness in the way I touched her. She relaxed into the moment, and a peaceful joy passed between us as we held each other, simply enjoying each other's presence. Afterward, she looked at me with surprise, a warm smile on her face. "Where did you learn that? I thought this was all new to you." I blushed, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I might have read or watched a few things online trying to learn a bit." She chuckled. "Well, you did well," she said, pulling me in for a warm hug. We lay there in silence, resting close, feeling a deep sense of connection and calm. After a few moments, she looked up at me, an inviting glint in her eyes. "Ready to spend a bit more time together?" she asked, and I nodded, smiling. We continued to enjoy the closeness, moving in sync and sharing moments filled with warmth and care. Our connection felt more genuine than anything I had ever known, and it was all about being there for each other, without rush, simply enjoying our time together. Eventually, we both felt tired and settled down, savoring the quiet after such a meaningful time together. Later, Diana suggested we take a shower to relax. We helped each other, laughing as we rinsed off, exchanging gentle touches, each one feeling like a small moment of trust and friendship. After we finished, we wrapped up in towels and returned to the bedroom, feeling refreshed and calm. In that shared silence, I felt truly connected, more than words could say, and it was a night I'd always remember. Diana frowned. "We might need to ask for new sheets. There is quite a mess on the bed." I chuckled a bit, remembering our fun. "Let's deal with that in the morning, my dear. We still have 2 more bedrooms here." We pulled off the wet sheets to let the bed dry and walked into the spare room, snuggling up together. "Love you," I said, starting to drift off. "Love you," Diana echoed, holding me close. The next morning, I woke up next to her, feeling her arm over me. She was still asleep and breathing softly. I shifted a little, and as she began to wake, I turned to watch her open her eyes. "Good morning, my love," I said. "Good morning, Mr. Morning Breath," she giggled. Even though we had washed up the night before, we didn't brush our teeth, so kissing was limited. But that didn't stop us from sharing a few playful moments. We were hungry, so we brushed our teeth and got dressed to go for breakfast. Watching Diana get ready felt like seeing art being made. I loved seeing her put on her clothes. She even wiggled a little as she slipped into her jeans, making it hard for me to resist reaching out. She found a shirt and pulled it on, smiling at me. "I'm going to tease you all day," she said with a grin. We headed out, letting the reception know our room needed fresh sheets, then looked for a cafe. We found a cozy little spot with great coffee and a nice menu, settling down to enjoy our meal and people watch. Sitting side by side, Diana kept her hand close to mine while we enjoyed the moment. "Honey, I hope you know you made last night amazing," she said. I laughed lightly. "Just like you made my night special." "No, Harry, I'm serious. I've had some experiences before, but they weren't good," she said, blushing a bit. "Last night was different. You made me feel truly cherished and special, like I was the only one that mattered." I smiled as her cheeks turned a deeper shade of pink. Curious, I asked, "What do you mean?" She took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts before looking at me. "Well, I've never done certain things before. If you had asked me yesterday, I wouldn't have imagined trying some of them. But last night felt special, and I like doing those things with you." I could see her trying to express herself, and it made me smile at her shyness. She continued, "Harry, I've never I had never felt like that before, not even when I was alone. "You were amazing," she said. "I couldn't get enough of you. It felt like I was with someone new, and I was happy to share that with you." She leaned in and kissed me softly, and we finished our late breakfast. After that, we strolled around the city for the morning. I called our driver, and 20 minutes later, we were on a tour of Sydney. He took us to the Opera House where we walked around, took selfies, and had a great time. Next, he took us to the Harbor Bridge, and we managed to join a bridge climb that let us walk above the busy traffic below. Diana and I had a fantastic day. Once we returned to our hotel room, we spent time together, discovering more about each other and what we liked. I learned how to make her feel wonderful. We decided to shower together, enjoying the time we had. As we got ready, I stopped Diana from reaching into her suitcase. Standing there, she looked at me curiously. "I have a surprise for you," I said, as I grabbed a suit bag and opened it up. Inside, I revealed a little black dress with matching shoes and a clutch that I had bought for her in Paris when I was there for work. It was a designer item. I spent a long time picking it out, making sure I got the right size with the salesperson. Diana was surprised but happy. She slipped on some black underwear and I helped her into the dress. She glowed and spun around, admiring herself before heading to the bathroom for hair and makeup. "Harry, this must have cost a lot," she said. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to, Di. I can afford it, and I like to treat the people I care about. I want to give gifts to those who appreciate them." "Like your family?" Her question cast a shadow over the moment, and I frowned as I got my own suit out of the bag, which was made to match her dress. "Yes. It's been tough lately. They keep asking me for money. Joan sends me messages and Dad leaves voicemails. I don't enjoy talking to him. He thinks he deserves something because he believes they helped me succeed." Diana looked concerned as she applied her eyeliner. "Your dad and sister have called me while you've been traveling. They've asked me to convince you to help them with different things. They haven't been outright threatening, but I'm not excited about visiting them again. I really don't want to go without you. Your mother is kind, and your sister seems indifferent. But your father and brother, it's okay. I understand. You heard some of the challenges I faced growing up when we talked last night. I get it." She paused and came closer, looking into my eyes before giving me a soft kiss. "You are one of the bravest people I know, Harry. I struggle to share my past, and maybe one day I will. But in many ways, you've endured more than I have." We finished getting ready and had a car waiting to take us to a nice French restaurant. Later, I had secretly arranged tickets to a symphony at the Opera House. At dinner, Deanna chose a delicious salmon dish with fresh greens, and I had a steak with a rich butter sauce and tasty vegetables. After dinner, while we were thinking about dessert, one of the waiters accidentally dropped a beautifully crafted box that looked like it contained jewelry from the time of French royalty. I immediately stood up to help the waiter, who seemed a bit embarrassed, but he was all right. The rest of the restaurant paused to watch, and Diana got up to help as well. Once the waiter left, I stayed on my knees and opened the small box, revealing a sparkling diamond ring. The whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath, and Diana gasped. "Diana Brown, from the moment I met you, you've captured my heart. You inspire me to be a better person. Your smile lights my path, and holding your hand makes me feel like I can achieve anything. This past year has shown me that my heart belongs to you, and I would be so honored if you would agree to be my wife." For a brief moment, everyone was silent, and she looked at me before remembering to take a breath. "Yes!" she shouted, jumping into my arms. I took the ring out of the box, and she held out her hand for me to slide it onto her finger. The restaurant erupted in cheers and applause. Diana smiled brightly, glancing between the ring and me. The restaurant manager and the same waiter who dropped the box came over to congratulate us, and he decided to treat us to our meal, pleased to see the proposal accepted. After he left, another couple came over to offer their congratulations. And for the next half hour, many guests approached us. I had never seen Diana look so joyful. Then the last couple approaching made her gasp. One of her roommates, Cindy, came over holding hands with Jack. I had known about their relationship for a while, but Diana was surprised to see them together. I felt happy for her. They were only a few years apart in age, and they seemed to match well. Cindy gave Diana a big hug, while Jack hugged me like a caring brother. We sat back down at the table, and they joined us for dessert. Over a dish of cheese and port, I told Diana about my plans and how I had arranged for Jack and Cindy to fly in this afternoon to wait for my proposal. Then I surprised all of them with 4 tickets to tonight's symphony at the Opera House, with a limo waiting outside for us. It was a wonderful evening. I had my fiancé by my side, dressed elegantly, with my best friend beside me along with his new girlfriend. The music of the symphony was incredible, and since we were all dressed up, it felt like we were part of something special. Over the years, whenever Diana and I traveled, we made it a point to attend a symphony in the cities we visited. It was around 1 in the morning when the limo took the 4 of us back to the hotel, and we said goodbye to Jack and Cindy, who headed to the room I had booked for them, while Diana and I went to our room. Once we were alone, Diana playfully teased me about Jack and Cindy. She then changed into something more comfortable and settled onto the bed. We enjoyed our time together, and I think the sun was coming up when we finished. We ended up needing to sleep in one of the spare rooms because we had left quite a mess in our room. We woke up around noon, thanks to a text message from Jack. "Hey, buddy, it's lunchtime. Are you two ready to join us before we fly home?" I replied that we would be down in half an hour. After sharing a kiss, we got up, showered, dressed, and packed. I called reception to have someone come for our bags, and we met with Jack and Cindy. "Wow, Diana, are you okay?" Cindy asked with a hint of concern, as Diana needed some help to sit down at the restaurant cafe in the hotel's lobby. "I'm fine," Diana replied. "We didn't get to sleep until around 5 this morning, so I'm just a bit tired from Harry's loving attention." Cindy paused for a moment and then burst out laughing. Jack playfully bumped fists with me, and we ordered some food. The girls then went to the bathroom while Jack and I talked about the night before. He wanted to make sure I was all right and told me, "Harry is the man," a few times. After we chatted about chemistry and my upcoming graduation from university, the girls returned. I noticed Cindy looking at me with a hint of envy mixed with respect. She leaned in to whisper something to Jack, whose eyes widened in surprise as he turned back to me and simply said, "Wow, dude." I was thrilled, but I couldn't quite understand everything that was being said. We were really excited about getting married. Within a week of getting back home, we picked a wedding date for just over 6 months later. Diana almost moved in with me right away. Most nights, she stayed over, only slipping away occasionally to help her soon-to-be former housemates move out. We would talk about her studies, and she decided to change her school to be closer to me. She became a familiar face at my office, using the coffee table by my couch for her laptop and books. Although she took fewer classes, she still did great in her studies. It was nice because I got to travel for work and bring her along. Some clients and investors enjoyed seeing Diana, and I loved sharing my favorite places with her. We made wonderful memories everywhere we went. When it came to family, reactions were mixed. We made sure to attend the next family gathering after I proposed in Sydney. We shared the news that we were getting married. Diana proudly showed off her simple yet elegant diamond engagement ring. My mom was excited and couldn't stop smiling, and even my dad managed a somewhat reluctant congratulations. Joan was surprisingly the most enthusiastic, loudly supporting our engagement and saying she couldn't wait to see Diana make me a happy man. "Oh, honey," Diana teased Joan playfully, "after how your brother made me feel the day after he proposed, I can tell you he's quite a character." Joan nearly spilled her drink, while I could feel my face turn red, knowing my family didn't like to talk about such things. Both my dad and brother blushed too, though it was hard to tell if they were mad or embarrassed. Throughout the afternoon, everyone kept looking at Diana, and I enjoyed watching her shine. It was one of the few times I could relax and feel proud of my fiancée. Another great moment was graduating from university with my degree in chemistry. I considered doing more advanced studies, but with my business and Diana, I wasn't sure I would have the time. I could always go back to learning later. The company was doing well, with over 800 employees in 8 locations around the world. Here at home, we produced the main ingredient and shipped it to other plants to make the special plastics we were known for. The patent I had made it hard for other companies to create the compound without paying us, so I felt confident that Diana and I would be financially secure. However, planning the wedding did bring up some challenges. My legal team was hired to look after my interests, especially to protect my things in marriage or in case something went wrong. They wanted Diana to sign a detailed agreement before our wedding. Surprisingly, my family did not support this. At one of our regular family gatherings, we were all talking about the wedding. I sat on one couch with Diana, while my parents were on another. Joan was with her boyfriend, Fred, though she changed partners often. Greg sat alone in his chair. I felt sorry for him. He often acted like he was better than everyone else, which made it hard for him to make friends. I think this was because my dad always gave him everything without teaching him any lessons. Everyone but Diana and I opposed the agreement. "Harry, this is wrong. When you marry Diana, everything should be shared. This is just a way for the wealthy to keep everything for themselves," Dad said. "But Dad, I am part of the wealthy. I don't have anything to hide from Diana," I replied. She squeezed my hand. "You need to see that this agreement protects not just me, but also everyone who works for me. If something happens to me, I want to make sure everyone, including Diana, is taken care of." Dad looked upset. Also, Diana is well cared for in this agreement, so I would never hold back from her. Diana squeezed my hand again. "Dad," she started calling my parents Mum and Dad after we got engaged. I think it made Dad a little uneasy, which was likely why she did it. "I fully support Harry. I will sign the agreement because I trust him. I have nothing to lose, and it's the right choice." She looked at Dad firmly, as if they were having a silent discussion. At that moment, Greg, always ready with his opinions, spoke up. "If it were up to me, I wouldn't have any agreement. I'd just give everything and walk away." Joan shot him a look. "You really are clueless." "I am not," he shot back. "Yes, you are. Calling Harry a mistake just makes me wonder if he really is or if you are." Mum jumped in before things escalated. "Enough, you two. This is about Harry and Diana. They will make the decisions that make sense for them." With that, Dad stood up, raised his hands in frustration, and left the room. None of you understand. Life is hard. As the weeks went by leading up to the wedding, we sent out invitations, and people confirmed they would come. We divided up different groups we were part of. I asked Jack to be my best man, and Diana chose Cindy to be her maid of honor. We invited many people from our office, including some managers from our overseas locations. A few government officials and business contacts wanted to attend the wedding of a young professional like me. We even had a couple of reporters who asked to come. Our PR firm allowed this as long as all photos and stories were approved before they were shared. We also made a big decision by buying a piece of land and starting to build a house. It would be a large 7-bedroom, 2-story home on 100 acres, about 40 minutes from the city and an hour from my office and lab. The house wouldn't be finished until a few months after our honeymoon, but I was excited about it. The master bedroom would take up a big part of the top floor and include large walk-in closets. I loved that it would have a double shower with 2 shower heads. In addition, we were adding a spacious kitchen, a family room, a media room, a study, and a garage for multiple cars. We thought big because we wanted to stay there for a long time. Though I was doing well financially, we did take a small mortgage, but we planned to pay it off in a few years if things continued to go smoothly. I also updated my car. I kept my original Mustang, which is a classic, but I bought a new one, a 2020 GTR Mustang, in burnt orange with black racing stripes. It had over 500 horsepower and a 6-speed manual transmission, and you could hear it coming from a distance. I also got Diana a new Jeep JL, with a removable roof and all the extra features like heated seats and steering wheel, a full navigation system, and good storage space. With a new house, new cars, and our wedding coming up, we were excited to start a good life together. Of course, we still disagreed sometimes, but we talked things through and never went to bed angry. For our honeymoon, I took 6 weeks off. We planned a fantastic cruise from Sydney to Honolulu, staying in one of the best suites on a top ship. The best part was that Diana would be away from her devices and cut off from the outside world while on the ship. After that, it was just going to be the 2 of us. The months flew by, and suddenly it was time for my wedding. The day was clear and warm. As I stood at the altar waiting for my bride, I felt the excitement that every man likely feels before getting married. Jack noticed my nerves. "Don't worry, buddy. There's always time to run," he laughed. Greg, one of my groomsmen, and my brother joined in. "Yeah, mistake. You should run now, and Dad and I will take care of everything for you," Jack nudged him playfully. Just then, the music started, and Diana appeared. After a moment to gather herself, she walked down the aisle with Norman by her side. Since she had no family left, Norman was happy to step in and give her away. He had one daughter who was a teenager, and he was already nervous about this moment for her someday. They made it down without any issues. As the ceremony continued, we exchanged our vows. When the minister asked if anyone objected, we heard a grunt as we saw Mom squeeze Dad's hand. But that was all, and soon we were officially married. The reception was fantastic. Diana focused on what I liked, so instead of a typical buffet, she hired some of the best BBQ chefs from around the state. They set up 2 days earlier in a field we rented just for the reception, bringing in 3 different groups with their smokers to make ribs, pulled pork, sausages, and wings. With sides of cornbread, slaw, and chili fries, it was a joyful celebration. Even my dad had to admit the food was great. As the evening went on, we cut the cake, danced, and mingled with guests. I made my way around the room and spoke with everyone and even chatted with a reporter about how marriage would help us grow. I don't remember everything I said, but everyone seemed happy. However, during my talk with the reporter, I noticed my parents moving toward Diana. I kept glancing at her while I spoke, and it was the only moment that day when she looked upset. My dad appeared to be saying something serious, and my mom seemed to be trying to calm him down. I excused myself and walked over to hear my father finishing up. "Don't forget what you owe us, or I'll make sure the boy knows," he said. I stepped in quickly. "What do you think my wife owes you, Dad? And why would you need to remind me?" All 3 looked over at us. Mom and Diana turned red, while Dad looked ready to explode. Before he could say anything, Mom jumped in to defuse the situation. Your dad, who has had a bit too much to drink tonight, was just talking about how we brought you two together. Nice save, Mom, I thought. I was going to ask about it, but Diana looked embarrassed. There was more to the conversation, but she silently asked me to drop it. Not a problem, but if you'll excuse us, Mom and Dad, we need to finish some things and say our goodbyes so this party can wrap up. Diana took my arm, and we walked back to Norman, where Jack, Cindy, and Norman's wife, June, were waiting. We went through the usual bouquet toss, and Cindy caught it. I gave Jack a friendly pat on the back, but he leaned in and whispered that he had already bought the ring. After we said our goodbyes, we got into the limo that work had arranged for us. We poked our heads out of the sunroof and waved goodbye to everyone as we drove away. When we arrived at the hotel, I spent what felt like forever helping Diana out of her dress. It was worth it, though. She looked stunning, wearing stockings and a garter with delicate panties. Suddenly, she hurried toward the bathroom. A moment later, I heard her laughing from inside. It was so hard to move in that dress. I had to ask Cindy and Joan for help to use the restroom a couple of times. At the reception, I had to cross my legs, she said as she got ready. Now, where were we? That night, we shared a special moment as a married couple. It was calm and gentle. We were both tired from the long day, but we fell asleep feeling happy. The next day, we flew to Sydney and were taken to the cruise ship. Because of what we were paying, we were treated like VIPs, able to board whenever we wanted and having people assist us with everything. We chose to get on the ship early. While everyone else boarded, I ordered us a couple of drinks and joined Diana on our balcony. Our butler, yes, we had our own butler for the trip, brought our drinks and we relaxed as we settled in. I thought it was a good time to bring up what happened at the reception. Dee, are you okay? Last night I felt like there was something going on with Mom and Dad. I interrupted, but I think I missed something. Diana turned a bit red, took a sip of her drink, and sighed. You're right, Harry. There was something, but it's not my place to share. It's really up to them to explain. The part you walked in on was your dad pushing me to talk to you about giving them part of your business now that we're married. I don't want to keep anything from you. They said if I could convince you, they wouldn't tell you some secrets that might hurt us, especially you. She raised her hand and said, I don't know everything, but I do know enough to realize this might hurt you. However, it's not my place to speak for them. If I tell you without them, it would only make things worse. Her expression was a bit sad. I'm really sorry, my love. I didn't want our honeymoon to start this way. Please understand that I care for you deeply, and I am trying to protect you from the negativity, especially from your father. I never want to see you in pain, so I will stand by you until they decide to share with you. We had only been married one day, and already we were facing tough trust issues. As we sat and enjoyed our drinks, I knew deep down that Diana loved me completely. I spent about 5 minutes figuring out my feelings. On one hand, my wife didn't want to share something because she was worried about me and thought that a part of the truth would hurt me. On the other hand, as husband and wife, we needed to trust each other fully. I chose to take the harder route of trusting my wife, even though it made me feel uneasy. I will admit that this upsets me, I said. There's a secret here that involves me, my family, and somehow you're also part of it. She nodded and I sighed. But Di, I will trust you. I believe you want what's best for us. I feel a bit anxious, but as long as you stay with me and guide me, I am willing to follow your lead." She stood up, moved to sit on my lap, and kissed me softly. "My husband, my love, I'm sorry to do this, but I want the best for you. What I do know will only cause you more pain, so I need a bit of time to sort this out," she said, and kissed me again. "But this isn't the time for such conversations. This is our honeymoon, and I believe your new wife deserves some attention." So, I focused on her, and a little over an hour later, feeling closer and more at ease, we walked around the ship hand in hand, leaving behind the worries about my family. At first, our butler, Phil, guided us, but then we told him we wanted to explore on our own. Those first few days were magical. We relaxed in the sun, enjoyed the spa, watched shows, and played some fun games. The ship stopped at beautiful islands where we took guided tours. Diana had bought a stylish navy blue sports bikini that fit her nicely. I felt a bit envious, but also proud as I noticed others admire her as she walked by. I have to say the most enjoyable part was the themed evening parties. Everyone dressed up according to the theme: white outfits, back-toe school styles, Gatsby. It was all such great fun. We were invited to dine with the captain as special guests, and afterward, we got a behind-the-scenes tour of the ship. Each day, we shared our love for each other often. One particular day, after returning from the beach, Diana and I had a moment we both cherished. Diana lay back on the bed, feeling relaxed, and I joined her. We explored our connection, enjoying each other's presence. She was playful and affectionate, and I focused on making her feel good. As we enjoyed our time together, we shared soft touches and laughter, feeling close to one another. Diana's playful touches made me feel a rush of happiness. The way we shared our love was a beautiful expression of our bond. After a while, we both felt a sense of joy and satisfaction. When it was over, we lay together, comfortable and happy. I playfully kissed her foot as we rested. "That was amazing, my love. I never expected to feel that way." "I know. It was unexpected for me, too. I just went with the moment." Diana raised an eyebrow with a playful smile. "You know, I'd love if we could take turns and make each other feel special later." I chuckled and nodded. "You got it." After getting ready for dinner, we headed out to enjoy the evening. By the time we returned to our room later, we were both happy and relaxed. Throughout the rest of the trip, we enjoyed each other's company like any newlyweds on a honeymoon. We spent most of our time together, making memories that would last a lifetime. When the cruise ended, we disembarked in Honolulu after nearly a month at sea. We were both tired but feeling refreshed with that sense of joy that comes from new beginnings. I had arranged for us to stay in a beautiful penthouse loft overlooking the city and the ocean. On the first day back on land, we mostly rested, letting our bodies adjust from the gentle sway of the sea. Anyone who has spent time on the water knows that coming back to solid ground feels a little like the world is still moving. Resting together made it easier. The next day, we relaxed by the pool, chatting about the future. Diana was close to finishing her college degree, and she was eager to look for a job to keep herself active and involved, even though she didn't have to work. She wanted to contribute before we eventually decided to start a family. We both agreed we wanted kids soon and planned that when we got back home, Diana would go off her medication and we'd let things happen naturally. We dreamed together about building our future home, which was already in progress and would be ready in a couple of months. We talked about family gatherings, birthday parties, and all the simple joys of life. We imagined hosting barbecues, celebrating birthdays by the pool, and watching our family grow. Diana looked at me thoughtfully, remembering something I'd mentioned before. "Hey, you promised me a little surprise, remember?" she said with a playful glint in her eyes. Smiling, I took her hand, and we walked back to our room, eager to share a quiet moment together. We felt a deep connection as we talked about our plans and dreams, knowing this was just the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. As we rested, we both felt grateful for the love and joy we shared. We spent time together, enjoying the warm evening and the closeness that had grown between us. I gently held her, giving her my full attention, showing her how much she meant to me in simple ways. There was no need for words, just a quiet understanding shared between us. She rested her hand in mine, a peaceful smile on her face, and we both felt completely at ease. The comfort of being with each other brought a calm that felt deeply satisfying. We were simply content in each other's company, enjoying the warmth and trust we had built. Eventually, we lay back, just talking quietly and sharing dreams for the future. We spoke about our hopes, our plans, and the home we'd create together. It was a moment filled with tenderness, a simple yet meaningful connection that needed no embellishments. We drifted into a peaceful sleep, wrapped in a sense of companionship, both of us grateful for the bond we shared. It was a night defined by trust, warmth, and the feeling of being fully present for one another. I helped her lie down on the bed, and then I carefully moved away from her, lying next to her. We were both relaxed and happy. She gently placed her hand on my face. "I love you so much, Harry." That was wonderful. We fell asleep for a bit, then got up and took a shower to freshen up. Diana walked with a little extra bounce for the next few days, but she had a big smile on her face until we boarded the plane to go home. The next few months were fantastic. We were enjoying our marriage and spent a lot of time together. We also enjoyed the company of our friends Jack and Cindy and Norman and June. Our new house was ready, even though the pool and garden still needed work. When I returned home from my travels, our work was busier than ever, and all our projects were fully loaded. I was away about a week each month, with 2 of those trips being international. Diana always traveled with me. It was good to have the money for her to join me. During the day, while I worked, she would sit in my office, working on design projects for our home or helping people online using what we learned in our counseling course. She made friends with the staff. They liked having her around, knowing she was the boss's wife. Sometimes, she would go visit local sites with one of our team members driving her. We were having a great time together, and it felt like an extension of our honeymoon. When we got home, we began to plan our future. We still attended the family gatherings, but we could only make it every few months because we were so busy. One important decision we made was to stop Diana's birth control pills 6 months after our wedding. We bought some pregnancy tests and got started on trying for a baby. A few weeks later, we were back at a family gathering. It was a small one with just family. It was our first time attending in a while, and Diana could tell I was feeling uneasy. We had told my parents about our plans to have a baby, and they were really putting us on the spot with questions. Joan and Greg were sitting back, watching us, and I was growing tired of my family judging every decision I made. They thought we were too young and should focus on our careers. They believed it wasn't the right time for us to have a child. Even Joan and Greg voiced that they thought we were being foolish to think about kids so early in our marriage. After a series of hurtful comments from Greg about how I must be weak because I take a long time to start a family, how I was a bad husband, and how Diana must be with me for my money, I had reached my limit. For years, I had put up with their insults. Nothing I did seemed good enough for this so-called family. It was time to leave. I stood up, frustrated that no one ever defended me unless it involved money. "Dee, get your things, we're leaving." Everyone turned to stare at me. Suddenly, I was the center of attention. "Where do you think you're going, son?" my father asked, trying to act like he was in charge. "I'm going home." "Why would you want to do that?" "We're your family," he replied. I knew he never really wanted me around. He wanted me to come and go on his terms. For the first time, I let my anger and disappointment show. "I don't even know if you are my family," I said, and everyone looked surprised. Family takes care of one another. Sure, they tease each other and argue, but they always support each other. This family has never stood by me. Whenever I need something from any of you, I pointed at my father, you just give me excuses. You put me down and tell me I should just accept things the way they are, which is never what's best for me. Not once have you helped me. I've never had a good experience with you as a father. Instead, you shower love and praise on that jerk when he is the biggest screw-up I know. I started to raise my voice, staring hard at my father. You give your little princess everything she wants. She just has to pout or act upset, and you give in. I used to have a great sister, but as she gets older, she's becoming more and more selfish. She has no clue how the world works because you do everything for her. And you, I said, glaring straight at Greg, have done nothing but push me down since we were kids. I could have gone to the police for what you did to me, for the way you treated me. You're the worst kind of bully who puts others down to cover your own weakness. What's worse is I took your side and hid the evidence. Just now, you question my worth when you can't keep a relationship for more than a month. You know why they leave you? It's because you think you're a gift to women, and that's just not true. You think everyone else is wrong because your parents could do no wrong. Well, let me spell it out for you, big brother. You are a sorry excuse for a man. You may have muscles, but you don't know how to use them wisely. Every time you speak, you only make yourself look foolish, and it makes people uncomfortable. Right now, all you can do is throw insults at me for no good reason. Just because you feel less than me in certain ways does not justify your hurtful words. It is time for you to grow up. I looked at everyone around me. My family doesn't care about me. My sister and mother barely notice what happens in my life, and the only time Joan pays attention is when she wants money. No one said anything. They just stared at me while I continued to express my feelings. Speaking of money, yes, I have some. Do you know why I don't share it with you? Because you clearly don't care about me. I worked hard to pay my way through school because you wouldn't help. I built my business from the ground up with Norman, and you called me foolish for trying. But now that I've succeeded, you think you deserve something for nothing. You see my money and believe I should just hand it over. It feels like you care more about money than me. For you, I'm just a way to get what you want. I see your small construction business barely getting by, yet you keep asking me for help. You even pressed Diana to convince me. But none of you give me any reason to support you. I don't think you understand what it means to love someone or to accept help as a gift. What's worse is that I don't trust any of you. The only person who truly cares about me is my wife. I only came to this gathering for her over the years because she believes family matters, knowing what it's like to feel disconnected. But from this moment on, I will learn what that means for myself, because I'm done with all of this. You can all back off. Let's go, Diana. I turned to leave, grabbing my keys, wallet, and our phones from the kitchen. Diana followed quietly behind me before Dad tried to speak again. Now listen here, son. I spun around and glared at him, my mother sitting beside him, stunned by my expression. No, Dad. You need to listen to me. My name is Harry. It's not boy, and it's not a mistake. It's not just any name you might think of. It's Harry, spelled Harry. But you know what? You can call me whatever you want because I'm done with all of this. Goodbye. Without saying more, I left everyone stunned and hopped into the car. Diana quietly got in next to me. I sped out of the driveway, leaving tire marks and a cloud of smoke behind. I looked back and saw them standing at the front, watching me leave. Soon, the calls began first from Dad, which I ignored, then Mom, and even Greg and Joan tried to reach me. They started texting, and when that failed, they turned to Diana. But she wisely chose not to respond to any of it. After an hour on the road, Diana broke the silence. "Harry, are you okay?" "No, I'm not, Di. I've held this in for so long, and it's only getting worse. After what Greg said today, I just couldn't take it anymore. I want nothing to do with them." Tears filled my eyes. I didn't like my family. I wasn't even sure if I loved them anymore. But when I looked at Diana, I felt love for her. I realized that my feelings for my family had faded over the years. For a long time, I had just tolerated them, and now I couldn't understand why they would treat someone like that. I started to cry, mourning for a connection I had never really understood as I drove home. Diana rested her arm on my leg. "It's okay, my love. I understand. I'm really proud of you. Let's take a few weeks and I'll step in. I don't want to talk to them without you. But I'll be your voice and make sure they know we're done." "Di? Yes? Are you okay?" She shook her head. "No, like you, I'm not okay. The things I told you, I think we need to discuss them soon. If we are really cutting your family out of our lives, I need to share some things with you. But I'm scared because it's not good news. And I don't know everything. Just know that I love you so much, and my heart is yours. I will stand by you." She trembled as she spoke. I felt anger and frustration, but seeing her fear made me calm down. "We can talk about it now if you want. We can find a place to stop." "No, Harry. I need a little time to think. There are some things I need to understand first. Could you trust me? For a couple of weeks?" "Di, I don't know. I'm worried. I can see the fear and sadness in you right now." Tears filled her eyes. "I understand. But if we do this, I need to get some things sorted first, okay?" "I don't like it. Di. But I will trust you. I feel like this is going to change our lives more than I want to admit. Just please don't take too long. Today showed me that I am struggling in the dark with something I don't understand, and it scares me." On the way home, we kept reassuring each other that everything would be okay. But in my mind, I felt clouds gathering. I knew Diana had some heavy news to share with me, and she needed time to prepare. This wasn't going to be easy. We warmed up some leftovers and had a light meal before getting ready for bed. I planned to spend the afternoon in the office preparing for upcoming presentations, but the next morning Diana and I would have breakfast with Jack and Cindy. As we got into bed and shared a kiss, Diana reached out playfully. "Did you really mean what you said to Greg about comparing sizes?" I laughed for the first time in hours. Yes. Being brothers, we did see each other a few times growing up. I'll admit, I might have exaggerated a bit. But from what I remember, Greg is much smaller than me. I was just so mad, I may have gone too far. You know, even if you don't think you have all of his muscles, I believe you have the two important ones, she said with a smile. Two? Yes. The one down here, she said playfully. And the one up here, she added, kissing me gently on the forehead. You are the smartest person I know. You're wealthy yet humble, and you have nearly 1,000 employees worldwide. Even Norman relies on you. I've seen you stay calm with everyone, and today you handled things with logic, sharing only what you thought was true. I was so proud of you. I love you. Suddenly, Diana looked at me with a playful smile. So, do you think you could make a baby with me like you joked about today? I smiled back at her, feeling a connection between us. Over the next few weeks, things felt a bit tense. Work was busy as we prepared a new version of my well-known plastic formula. It was something that would not change our patent, but it would help us produce more without needing a lot more materials, leading to more profit for our company. Diana and I were really focused on starting a family. She spent time reading about the best ways to conceive, including the right positions, timing, and even what to wear. As her most fertile time approached, we agreed to try every 2 days. I was happy to share this special time with my lovely wife. Meanwhile, my family was still trying to mend things. My sudden departure had led to a big argument among them. I wasn't sure why they were upset with each other. I had shared my feelings about their behavior toward me, and yet I found myself the target of their anger, even when I wasn't there. When my mother couldn't reach either Diana or me, she called Norman and Jack. They had no idea about the situation with my family, but when I shared a brief version, they listened and offered their support. Jack, in particular, wanted to help. Harry, at some point you will need to speak to them again. It might be better to do it sooner rather than later. You've said what you felt, and as someone who saw the marks on you growing up, he said, looking serious. He raised his hand to pause me. Yes, a few of us teachers noticed, and so did some students. We put it together that it might be your father or Greg causing it. That's why many of us worked to get you the scholarship. We wanted to help you leave before something serious happened, no matter how much you tried to defend them. But look at how far you've come now. You have a wonderful wife, a great job, and you will be a fantastic father. Still, I believe you need your family back if it can be on your terms. Just remember, now that you've expressed yourself, it has to be on your terms. I didn't want to admit it, but he was right. I knew I had to reach out to my family on my own terms, but I had no idea that those terms were about to change. That evening at home, after we had shared a lovely time together, Diana and I were relaxing on the bed when she brought up my family. Harry, I think I should go see your parents tomorrow, she said. What? I was taken aback, still processing what Jack had said the day before. She sighed. Cindy called me and mentioned your conversation with Jack. Jack is worried about you. I feel I need something from your parents before I can talk to you and help clear things up. Also, if I talk to your mother without your dad or Greg being there, it might go better. There won't be any shouting. I felt uneasy about this idea. Something didn't seem right. I needed to believe in her. Okay, just call me when you arrive and when you leave. The next afternoon, Diana left in her Jeep. She sent me a message right after she got there and before she went inside. For the next 2 hours, I felt anxious. I started trying to call her after 7:30. By 8:30, my worry turned to panic. I called my mother, but it went to voicemail. Mom, where is Diana? About 5 minutes later, I got a reply. She's not here. I quickly got in my car and drove off. I called everyone I could think of. My plan was to drive the route between our house and my parents' house to see if I could find her. I hoped nothing had gone wrong. I called our friends one by one, but no one had seen her. They said they would keep an eye out and let me know. Cindy expressed her concern and tried to comfort me. I told her I was heading toward my parents' place, thinking it was the route Diana might take. When I arrived at my parents' house, I noticed Diana's car in the driveway. Confused, I thought, why did Mom say she's not here? Anxiety grew as I stepped out of my car. It was nearly 10 at night, and everyone should have heard me arrive. My mother came to the door wearing her house robe, looking worried as I approached the house. "Harry," she warned. "Harry, don't go in there." Ignoring her, I pushed past her into the house. At first, everything seemed normal, but then I heard a strange noise coming from my parents' bedroom. I rushed toward the sound, and my heart sank. Inside the room, I saw my wife, in a very vulnerable position. My father was there, and it was clear something was terribly wrong. My brother stood nearby, looking amused. I yelled, "What is going on here?" They all turned to face me, and my father made a shocking remark. "Just what it looks like. We are. With your wife." He was smiling, but it felt cruel. My brother laughed, and I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. I couldn't believe this was happening. My mind raced, and the world around me began to blur. This was a nightmare I couldn't accept. My wife, the woman who saved me from difficult times and claimed she loved me deeply. She was the one I loved back, the one who meant everything to me. Right now, everything we shared felt like it was being taken apart by my own family. "Trust me," she had said, and like a fool, I did. I stumbled back out of my parents' bedroom and fell in the hallway. My mother reached out to touch my shoulder, but my mind was clouded with confusion. In a moment of frustration, I pushed her away. She fell back, surprised. I couldn't see clearly. My heart was heavy with pain. I could hear my sister laughing and making hurtful comments. Tears began to fall as I struggled to get up, feeling weak and lost. My throat felt tight, and my pulse raced. Back in the bedroom, I could hear my father making strange sounds. I stumbled towards the front door, grasping the table for support. "No!" I cried out, hearing more laughter from inside. My mother was starting to recover from the shove. She looked at me, saying, "Harry, it will." But I didn't stay to hear more. I dashed out the door, unable to bear the feeling of betrayal from Diana and my family. I ran to my car and somehow got it started. I drove away fast, tears still streaming down my face. I had no clue about what would happen next, but at the moment, it didn't matter. I felt like my life had ended, all because of the person who said she would be there for me. When I noticed the sirens behind me, I was on autopilot, speeding over the limit without a care. I made sharp turns, feeling my anger boil inside me. I switched my car to a sportier setting, making it harder for the police to keep up. I knew they would recognize my car and trace me back to my home, but I didn't care. They didn't understand the betrayal I felt. If I was going down, I wanted it to be memorable. But then a thought struck me. What about my wife? My family? If I died, they would come out on top. As the police followed close behind, I wondered how long it would take for them to catch me. I quickly dialed my friend, Jack. "Hey, Harry. How's it going? Did you find Diana?" he asked. I took a deep breath to hold back more tears. "No time to explain. I need you to help me at the police station right away. Call Norman and make sure my lawyer is ready." "Jack, if you're my friend, and right now, you and Norman might be my only real friends, please, just help me. I don't know how much longer I can hold it together." "Harry, what's happening? Are you okay?" "Not now. I need you to call Norman and come get me." I hung up, feeling like I was barely keeping it together. Then came the hard part. I drove myself to the nearest police station a few kilometers from home and turned myself in. I actually beat 4 squad cars there by about 4 minutes and was already explaining things to the officer at the front desk when they all arrived in a rush. "Harry, what's going on, man?" It was Tim Redwick, an officer I knew from school. He was a year ahead of me, and over time we'd gotten to know each other, especially since we both loved Mustangs. He knew my car well, and I could tell he was worried. "I thought someone stole your car." He took one look at me, saw my distressed state, and immediately asked, "Is Diana okay?" The mention of Diana hit me hard. I collapsed to the floor, breaking down in tears, overcome by the weight of everything. The adrenaline had worn off, and I felt completely drained. Seeing this, they realized I posed no threat. My keys were on the desk, and I was clearly not in any state to cause trouble. I was incoherent, barely aware of what was happening around me. After a while, someone helped me up from the floor and guided me to a seat. I was given tissues and water, but I just sat there, lost in anguish. I don't know how much time passed before I began to focus on my surroundings again, catching bits of conversations nearby. I've checked the area, and there's no report that matches Diana's description, Tim was saying to someone. Harry told me she went to his parents' house last night to get some important information from them, said Jack. He called me around 9:30, looking for her, and then again close to midnight, asking me to bring Norman here because he was in trouble. What kind of trouble is he in, Tim? I don't know, Jack, Tim replied. Earlier, Harry led several squad cars, including mine, on a wild chase. He's clearly going through something serious, but no one got hurt, and he came straight here. Something's really wrong. Has he mentioned Diana at all? Norman asked. I couldn't hold back. Diana, no. I groaned, feeling the pain all over again. Suddenly I felt someone's arms around me. It was Cindy. Shh, Harry, it's okay. We're here. What's going on? Where's Diana? I broke down again, words slipping out between sobs. Di betrayed parents, I muttered before the overwhelming pain took over, and eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep. When I awoke with a start, I was lying on a couch with a blanket over me and a pillow beneath my head. I realized I'd been dreaming. The sense of loss and confusion was still heavy on me, and I tried to pull myself together, wondering what to do next. My sister was sitting close to Diana when Joan got up. Everyone turned to me with smiles. Then I heard my mother's voice from my wife's lips say, "You're just feeling nervous. Don't worry, this will all be okay." I wanted to shout, but I held it in. I found myself in a lounge. Norman and June were at a table, and Tim was there too. Jack and Cindy, who I thought were around before, were now missing. My quick movement caught their eye, and June was immediately by me. Her calming words helped ease my worry. "It's all right, Harry. You're okay. You're still at the police station. It's mid-morning, and everything will be fine." She gently rubbed my back and sat down beside me, repeating that it would be okay. I often wondered what it felt like to have a mother's love. At that moment, June felt more like a mother to me than mine ever had. "Where are Jack and Cindy? I thought they were here earlier." Tim, Norman, and June exchanged glances. "I'm not sure if you're ready for this, Harry," Norman said. I held my breath. My heart began to race and my chest felt tight. "Diana?" They nodded. "I guess I need to know eventually," I said, getting ready for what was next. "They are at the hospital with Diana." "The hospital? Wait, hospital?" Even though I was hurting and felt like everything was falling apart, and the people had let me down, I still cared about her. Was she hurt? Did something happen that harmed her? Norman continued. "Harry, we've been talking for the last few hours, and we think we have an idea of what happened to you last night. I can understand why you feel betrayed. We believe that what you witnessed really overwhelmed you. We managed to get a few words out of you, which helped us get started. So Tim here drove over to your parents' house to find out more." Tim took over. "Harry, there was some trouble, and it's not done yet. 2 officers knocked on your parents' door around 2 a.m. They saw lights on, so they knew someone was home. It took about 15 minutes of knocking before your mother answered. They didn't have a reason to enter without a warrant. But your report gave them enough to question everyone in the house. It took another 20 minutes talking to your mother before your father came out to tell them to leave. He insisted everything was fine, that it was just family at the house, and there hadn't been any issues except for your earlier argument with your wife. Tim looked at me carefully. Harry, this is hard to hear. How are you holding up so far? I clenched my fists, taking a deep breath. That's not what happened, but I sense there's more. Ill-manage. Tim nodded and continued. Norman and June were also listening closely, concerned, but still unaware of the full details. He explained that Diana had been taken to the hospital where she was being looked after. When officers visited my parents' home, my father told them that I had been thrown out for disrespecting the family, and that Diana was staying with them to be looked after due to my supposed temper. Tim's face grew more serious as he continued, recounting a disturbing discovery. After the officers prepared to leave, thinking everything was settled, my brother appeared unexpectedly, speaking in a way that made the officers suspicious. When they realized something was very wrong, they quickly acted. Norman, June, and I gasped at the same time, standing in shock. Harry, Tim said gently, Diana was found in a distressed state, and it was clear she needed help. She had been restrained, and she called out for you. The officers quickly responded, getting her to safety. My chest felt tight as the weight of this news sank in. I felt myself spiraling, barely able to process it. I was there. I was right there and didn't see it. June held me up as I felt my legs weaken. Harry, she whispered, don't give up. Diana needs you now. I steadied myself, determined to listen to the rest, no matter how painful. Tim, please continue. I need to hear all of it. Tim nodded, understanding the importance. It's hard for everyone, Harry. Just take it slow. He explained that when the officers realized what was happening, they moved quickly. They entered the room where they found Diana calling out for help. They secured the scene, ensuring everyone was safe, and made arrests. However, some family members had managed to escape during the confusion. Within minutes, more officers arrived, ensuring that Diana received immediate care and that all necessary actions were taken. Tim continued, Your father and brother fled after the officers tried to stop them. 2 officers were injured in the struggle and are now in the hospital, while your father and brother are still on the run. He took a breath and said, As for Diana, the officers untied her and covered her with a blanket until an ambulance arrived. She's been asking for you, Harry. Even in her sleep, she's been worried about you. Hearing that, I couldn't stay still. I need to see her. I need to go to her now. Tim held up a hand gently. Harry, I know you want to be with her, and you will. But before that, I need your statement. And there's some paperwork we have to finish. Diana is safe in the hospital right now, so we can go through this calmly. June, standing nearby, spoke up. How soon can we get him to her? Soon, Tim reassured her. Harry, let's go over what happened. It will help us understand things better, and then you can be on your way. For the next hour, I recounted everything. Norman and June were there, listening as I described how Diana had gone to speak with my parents after a recent argument we'd had with them. She wanted to address some difficult issues about my family. Then I explained my panic upon receiving a message saying she wasn't where she was supposed to be. I rushed to my parents' house, not sure what I'd find, only to walk in on a scene I couldn't fully process at the time. I described how, in my shock and pain, I thought Diana was there willingly and fled the house, overwhelmed and heartbroken. I drove aimlessly, consumed by confusion, until I realized police cars were following me. Finally, I brought myself to turn in at the station, calling Jack for help and asking him to bring Norman and a lawyer. Tim took notes, asking a few clarifying questions. One detail stuck with him, though. "Harry, back in school, there were some signs you often wore clothes that didn't fit, and there were times you looked like you'd been hurt. We all heard rumors, but we didn't know what to believe. Now, medical staff have found signs of injury on Diana, marks that suggest she was hurt. Does this connect with anything from your past?" I could feel my anger simmering. My family had harmed Diana in ways I'd only just started to understand. I explained as calmly as I could about the difficult history with Greg and how, growing up, I was never treated as an equal in my own family. Tim listened carefully, and as I spoke, I felt a new sense of determination to stand by Diana, knowing we'd face what was to come together. I shared how my accomplishments were downplayed. It took about 10 more minutes for Tim to feel satisfied, and he asked us to wait while he filed his report. After about 20 minutes, Tim returned. "Okay, everyone, there are a few important updates. First, the speeding and evading police charges have been dropped. Instead, you will take a defensive driving test. I also spoke to the station commander, and you can participate in some upcoming police charity events. This was the biggest legal hurdle for you, so you are now free." Before I could respond, he added, "I will arrange for a car to take you to the hospital. I don't think you are in a good state to drive." Turning to Norman and June, he said, "We can take you too, if you'd like. But there's one more thing." We looked at Tim in surprise. "Your mother and sister are here," he said, allowing the news to settle. "Your mother wants to see you." I quickly replied, "I don't care. I need to see Diana." Tim nodded and helped us with the details. He drove me directly to the hospital in his police car, while Norman and June took my car home to get clothes for Diana and me. They planned to meet us at the hospital. Once we arrived, I was taken straight to the private room where Diana was being treated. After leaving the emergency room and confirming her condition, I saw she was receiving excellent care. She was connected to several machines and was resting fitfully. As I entered the room, I went straight to her bed, kissed her forehead, and held her hand. I wasn't sure if she knew I was there, but she seemed to calm down immediately. Jack and Cindy came in moments later. Without letting go of Diana's hand, we embraced and cried together. The following days felt like a roller coaster of emotions. Many people visited: Norman, June, Jack, Cindy, Tim, and some co-workers who knew both Diana and me. News had spread about our situation, and many in the community were supporting us. We received cards and flowers from many different people, most of whom I didn't even know. That first night, I stayed in a chair next to Diana. I think it was around 2 a.m. when I felt a hand touch my head. I looked up to see her awake and looking at me. I hadn't let go of her hand since I arrived. "I'm so sorry," was the first thing I said. "Please tell me you love me," she said, her eyes searching mine. "I love you so much. I can't believe that." "Shh," she said gently, using her weak hand to pull me closer. I kissed her softly. Trying not to disturb the equipment around her, I climbed onto the bed and wrapped my arms around my beautiful wife, who had endured so much. The next day, the hospital staff arranged for a special double bed so I could stay beside Diana while she recovered. She was on an IV drip with pain relief and other medications to help her heal, and we were both told we'd be in the hospital for a few days. Later in the afternoon, Tim and another officer, Karen, visited along with Norman, June, Jack, Cindy, and Paul, my lawyer. Diana wanted me and Paul to stay with her as she gave her statement. What she shared was deeply troubling. Diana explained that she had gone to my parents' house with good intentions, hoping to ease the tension between us. She also needed some important documents, including my original birth certificate. When she arrived, she was welcomed in and sat down to talk with my mother. They shared a cup of tea, which tasted a bit stronger than usual, but she didn't think much of it at the time. After that, her memory became hazy, and she found herself waking up later, disoriented and restrained. As she described the situation, it became clear that she had been put through a terrible ordeal. Tim and Karen listened intently, taking notes as Diana described what she could recall, recounting unsettling details of the incident. The officers and everyone present supported Diana as best as they could, offering reassurance and comfort. It was a hard moment for all of us, but Diana's courage in sharing her story gave us strength. We were all committed to ensuring that justice would be served and that Deanna's voice would be heard. Diana shared the details with a trembling voice, clearly distressed by what she had endured. She explained that after she had been given a strong sedative, she remained aware of what was happening but found herself unable to move or react. At that point, she tried to struggle, only to be stopped forcefully and reminded to stay silent. Through her hazy memories, Diana recalled words meant to control and frighten her, and she was warned to keep quiet about the incident. They threatened her with serious consequences if she ever spoke up. With time, her mind became foggy from the drugs, and she could only remember snippets, like hearing voices or feeling faint sensations. At one point, she thought she heard my voice and tried to call out, but couldn't. Later, she vaguely remembered someone covering her with a blanket, and soon after, she faded in and out of awareness until she finally woke up and found me beside her. By now, Diana was sobbing, her spirit weighed down by the terrible experience. I held her hand tightly, feeling an overwhelming resolve. My sadness turned to a steady anger, knowing that people I once trusted had caused her so much pain. I silently promised that I would do everything in my power to seek justice for her and ensure she felt safe again. As I listened to her story, I felt a deep anger rising inside me. I thought about how I wanted to confront everyone involved: my father, my mother, my sister, and yes, even my mother who had neglected me. I felt like they needed to face the consequences of their actions. How could anyone do something so hurtful? I found myself questioning what I had done to deserve this treatment. After Diana shared her experience, Tim and Karen said goodbye, promising to check in on us later. Just then, I had an idea. I asked everyone to give Diana and me some extra time alone. They looked surprised but could see that this was important, so they left us in the room. They knew part of what had happened, but I doubted they understood everything. Once the door closed, I noticed that Diana seemed worried, and I felt a bit uneasy too. My wife had been through difficult times before we met, and now my own family had hurt her as well. I wasn't sure about the challenges we faced, but I knew she hadn't meant to betray me. It hurt, but I wanted to support her. She was still trying to process everything. I realized that we might need a good counselor to help us both. At that moment, it seemed like Diana was in more pain than I was. I leaned back on the bed and hugged her for a while in silence. She started to cry again, gripping my arm tightly. I understood that this moment would unfold many times in the near future. I was sad because we had a wonderful relationship, but it felt damaged. How could they do something so cruel to someone so close to them? That anger surged within me again. But then Diana's earlier words came back to my mind. As she calmed down, I knew I needed to ask her some hard questions. Di, I'm not going to ask if you're okay because I know you're not. I'm not either. I want you to know that I love you completely, even after everything that has happened. We will get through this, and I hope we can do it together, all right? She turned to face me, having removed her glasses. Her beautiful brown eyes were red, her face puffy from crying, and her nose was running. She looked like she was struggling. But as she looked at me, I sensed she saw hope and needed someone to lean on. I wanted so much to be that support for her. But I needed to understand more. A few minutes ago, while you were telling your story, you mentioned something I've never heard anyone say before. Can I ask you about it? If you don't want to talk about it, just let me know and I'll drop it. Okay? She nodded. You mentioned the statement, "He's not my son"? Diana, what does that mean? He's not my son? For a moment she looked worried. Then she stared at her hands. Then she looked at me. She found it hard to talk, but finally said, "My love, this is something I've wanted to tell you. It's why I wanted those papers from your mother. One of them is an old DNA test about you. Roger is not your biological father." So many things started to make sense. So all these years, they knew and kept it from me? Why? From what I understand, they didn't find out until you were about 3 years old. As you grew up, it became clear that your mother had an affair. You didn't look like your father and brother. Your hair was different, among other signs. Honestly, I'm not sure of all the details, but that's why they feel anger towards you. They see you as different, as an outsider. I believe Roger only gave you what he had to, and not more. You might think your mother never defended you because you were seen as a mistake. Greg and Joan are his, but you are not. You knew? She lowered her head and nodded. Yes. I found out a few months after we started dating. It was accidental. At that point, I was mostly seen as a family friend. Your family didn't know we were dating, and I was hesitant to tell them because you were becoming so important to me. I left my prescription sunglasses at their house. I walked in on Roger sorry. I can't call him your dad anymore, arguing with your mom about something you did. I think it was about your chemistry project. He said that since you weren't his son, he shouldn't have to put up with your behavior, and that you owed him for raising you or something like that. They knew I heard part of that, so Roger left the room, and Martha shared some things with me. She paused, took a breath, and continued. There's more. Martha showed me the DNA evidence and hinted that she had a letter from your real father for you. But Roger would never let you see it. I wanted to get those for you. That's why I went to their house the other afternoon. I hoped to get Martha to give me the documents without Roger there, as they should belong to you. I wanted to tell you so much, but I couldn't share the story because it wasn't mine to tell. I knew Roger would never tell you. I was trying to get your mother to stand up for you just once and tell you the truth. I sighed. My life felt more and more confusing. I think it had been a long time. I just never realized it. I needed to move on, though, and I focused on my next question, knowing it could hurt my already fragile wife. Why couldn't you tell me? Diana looked down at her hands and stayed quiet for a long moment. Di, why didn't you tell me? I really need to know. There is a pain inside me right now, and I need the pieces of the puzzle to help put us back together. She gave a tiny nod. This is tough, Harry. Do you remember before our first time, how I panicked and called myself damaged? I felt like I wasn't the person you thought I should be. I gently placed my hand on her arm. Of course I didn't care. I wanted you to be mine, and you gave yourself completely to me. Tears fell down her face onto the hospital bed, but she kept going. What I could never share with you was that I had an uncle who was still alive before I met you. I found out when I was almost out of high school that he was family. The Child Protection Agency thought it would be good for me to live with a relative, to have some stability. But Uncle Clinton was not the caring type. He took the help, but didn't want me around. He drank a lot and used drugs. One night he came into my room and hurt me when I didn't want it. He took something from me that I couldn't get back. She paused, sobbing, her hand tightly gripping mine. About 3 months later, he died from an overdose. I hadn't been living there very long, but it was one of the hardest times of my life. I was now 18, and he left me nothing in his will, so I was on my own with only a little money and a few clothes. I found a part-time admin job while I started college. It wasn't much, but it helped with some bills while I waited for the government student assistance. I ended up sharing a cheap apartment with a couple of girls, which is where I met Cindy. But the problem was the company where I worked. It was a construction company. I figured out which one it was. MJG Constructions, my former father's company. I had been there about 6 months when Roger, my boss, started inviting people from the office to his gatherings. I think he thought it made him look good as a boss. I nodded, remembering how we were always told to behave well when his group of friends came. After 6 months, there was one day when Roger came into the office and spent a lot of time talking to everyone but me. I was handling a lot of the office work, helping to schedule workers and arrange the trucks, that kind of thing. One day, after Roger came back from his meetings, he sat down next to me. He said he wanted me to join the next family gathering because he had a son he thought I should meet. He told me that I might appeal to his son because I was nerdy-looking, which surprised me a bit. He continued that he knew about my family situation and could help keep my past private as long as I met his son. I shook my head, starting to understand the situation better. So my father, Roger, who is no longer really my father, set us up. Yes. What I only found out later after I called you my boyfriend. She smiled, and for the first time that day, it felt like the sun came out. I learned he introduced us to get to your money. He believed that since you were close to your family, he couldn't just ask you for help. He thought I could be a way to get what he wanted. But I stopped working there once I got my college funds, shortly after we met, so his plan fell through. How did you find out about his intentions then? She took a deep breath. He told me after I announced that we were dating. He warned me that if I didn't do what he wanted, he would share my past with you. He would say terrible things about me to make sure you would stay away. What did you say to him? It was very difficult. I was really starting to fall for you, and I didn't want to lose you. His hurtful words affected me deeply, but I also knew you would make your own decisions. So I told him I would help if you and the family needed to communicate. But I would never ask you for money. That was your business, and no threats could make me turn against you. Suddenly, it felt like a heavy burden I had been carrying for years was lifted. Diana, before you say anything else, I need to tell you something. She looked at me and I could see her worry increasing. She had just shared something significant that could change everything between us. I felt her grip on my arm tighten, and I gently squeezed her arm in reassurance. You are the most incredible woman I have ever met. I loved you before I knew this about your past. You are the center of my universe, and I didn't think I could love you more than I already do. When I saw you on that bed in my parents' room, it felt like everything had been taken from me. My heart felt heavy, as if I'd lost my spirit. I was in shock when I got to the police station. My life felt completely shattered. I had cared for you so deeply that I didn't know how to cope. She looked like she was about to break down. Tears spilled from her eyes. She gazed at her lap and asked, You say you loved me. Has what happened to me changed that? No. She looked up at me. No, if anything, my love for you has grown stronger. Diana, my dear, you have faced so much. You have fought for me, and you've never done anything to dishonor us. You went to that house for something I needed. Yes, you didn't share everything with me, but I understand your choices. Even in this difficult time, you're still fighting for us. Diana, I could not love you more than I do right now. I will ensure those who hurt you will face the consequences. I took a breath to calm myself. This will be tough, and we will struggle, but if you allow it, I will be by your side every step of the way. I leaned in, holding her face gently, and kissed her, letting my love flow into that moment. The kiss felt long and comforting until there was a knock on the door. Jack peeked his head in. Hi. Is everything okay? No, it's not, Jack. We are not okay. But we have each other, and we will get through this, I replied. Yes, please bring everyone in. With Diana's permission, there are things I need to share. Everyone entered the room, and with Diana's approval, I summarized the past week and shared some family secrets that I had just learned. As I explained the terrible things my family did to Diana, Jack and Norman grew visibly upset. Then when I revealed that I wasn't Roger's son and that my mother had an affair, they were shocked. When I talked about the plan to hurt Diana for money, they felt embarrassed for me. I chuckled lightly and said, well, their plan backfired. I ended up with the best person by my side, and all their attempts to hurt us won't go unanswered. The rest of the afternoon passed in conversation. After some time, Diana became quiet as more of her past came to light. Tim knocked on the door and walked in. The others sensed it was time to leave and told us they would check in with us tomorrow. Tim updated us on the situation. They had a few leads on Roger and Greg, but for now, they were still out there. My mother and sister were still in custody and had met with their lawyer. Tim was unsure if he would be their lawyer much longer after hearing about the charges against the girls and what the consequences would be for the men when they were caught. The company's finances were still intact, but that could change soon. We talked for a few more minutes, and then he left, promising to keep us updated. I sent a message to my lawyer asking to discuss bailing out MJG. Despite everything, many people depended on that company for their jobs. If the business was strong enough, I might be able to buy it and keep those jobs. However, I was uncertain whether the lawyers would need to look into it. That night, we slept in the hospital bed together, holding each other close. Diana would stay for another 2 days as she needed more care and had to meet with a hospital counselor before being released. Luckily, Norman and June had brought clothes and some items from home, making us more comfortable. In the morning, we showered together in the small hospital bathroom. While we both wanted to enjoy each other's company like we usually did, we simply washed and held each other, feeling a bit safer in each other's presence. Later that day, Diana's doctor, a woman named Marge Hill, came to see us. Dr. Hill reviewed most of the test results, noting that Diana was in good health and could go home the next day. However, she had something important to discuss. There's something we need to address with you. Normally, we talk about this privately with the patient. Would it be all right if your husband steps outside for a moment? Diana took my arm. No, it's all right, Dr. Hill. You can say anything in front of my husband. Marge nodded, feeling assured. Okay, I just wanted to check. During your blood tests, we noticed some hormonal changes that were a bit unusual. After the trauma you have experienced, some changes are expected, but these specific signs are related to pregnancy. There it was. It was possible that my ex-father or my ex-brother could be the father of my wife's child. I didn't know how to react, and neither did Diana. We were both left feeling bewildered. Dr. Hill stepped in. I understand this is tough for both of you, but can I ask if you were wanting a baby recently? I took a deep breath and looked at Diana. She nodded. Dr. Hill, we've been trying for a baby for the last few months, and before this situation, we were very close almost every day. If that's true, there's a good chance you might be the father. But I need to let you know that it's also possible your father or brother could be involved. Ex-father and ex-brother, I replied, feeling upset. She nodded. I am sorry for what you're going through. Hiding the truth won't help either of you. Can you give us a few minutes to talk? I asked, my voice shaky. Of course. I have other patients to see, but I'll return soon with some paperwork for what you need going forward. Take your time and discuss your next steps. She looked at Diana. Whatever you choose, just know that he is one of the strongest people I've seen. He has stayed by your side during this hard time when many would have walked away. I hope to find that kind of strength someday, too. There seemed to be a story behind her words, perhaps a past love or loss. Diana knew she spoke the truth. I was there for her, and she had stood by me in this very difficult moment. With Dr. Hill gone, we sat in silence for a few minutes, staring at everything but each other. We needed to talk. How are you feeling, Di? Honestly, I don't know. I'm pregnant, but I didn't realize it. I should feel excited since we've wanted this since our honeymoon, but with everything that's happened, I'm having a hard time feeling happy. What if the baby isn't yours? I don't know. I feel so angry and helpless. I wish I could have protected you. I keep thinking I let you down. And I'm scared that the baby might not be mine. I wish I could go back and stop you from going over there. I know. I don't remember everything, but I was frightened. The little I do remember was terrible. I wished you could have come to my rescue, and I regret not being able to call out to you when I needed you. And now, this. She looked down at her stomach, which showed no signs of pregnancy yet. What do we do, Di? Do we keep it? We had never discussed what we believed about such choices, and we weren't very religious. I don't know. I felt unsure. What if the baby is yours and we don't keep it? I had to admit. What if the baby isn't mine? Does this baby deserve to be loved by two people who wished for a child just because of something out of our control? Diana agreed with me. Harry, if we keep the baby and find out it belongs to someone else, how would you feel? She asked, shivering. I didn't know how to answer. Honestly, I'm not sure right now. I would feel angry at first, but we want a baby and you are pregnant. We don't know how long it could be before we have another chance or if we could even have another baby, if we didn't keep this one. We're struggling right now because this is all new and painful. I want to believe I could move past that to hold our baby. I don't think I could give up the chance to love our baby just because of how it came to be. Diana smiled sadly. You just said our baby, you know? I smiled back. I believe this is our choice. We'll still get a paternity test when we can, but, I said, placing my hand on her tummy, this will be our child. We discussed what it all meant. Although we both felt a bit uneasy, we wanted to try this. Besides, I wasn't a welcomed child. I was a mistake. Even if this baby isn't mine, I want to show love that I never received. We both agreed that it wouldn't be easy, but when Dr. Hill came back, we told her our decision, and I could see she was pleased. The next day, Diana was able to leave the hospital, and we went home together. For the first few days at home, Diana was always close by. She stayed nearby, and honestly, I was okay with that. I was working from home and planned to return to the lab in a few weeks. I wondered how Diana would manage without me, but I thought about asking Cindy or June to visit and help her. We also had a psychologist visit us each week to help with everything we were dealing with, both separately and together. We tried to be patient, though we felt more anger towards our family and ourselves than each other. When it was time for me to go back to the office, I didn't need to worry. The girls were happy to help, and Diana understood I couldn't stay away from work forever. The first day back was tough. When I arrived, everyone checked on me and asked about Diana. They didn't know everything that had happened, but they understood something bad had taken place in my family. My ex-mother and ex-sister were in jail, and the police were looking for my ex-father and ex-brother. Once I got home, Diana was right there by my side. She tried not to make it too obvious, but it was clear to everyone. In the following weeks, we settled into a routine. Diana would join me at work a few days when I didn't need to be in the lab. On other days, Cindy and June would come and spend time with her. About 6 weeks after what we now called the situation, Diana and I reaffirmed our wedding vows in a more intimate way. It wasn't a perfect moment, and we felt a bit shy at first, but we both felt a sense of connection. And afterward, we fell asleep, feeling happy. I worried that Diana might not want to be close to me after everything with Roger and Greg, but she wanted to reconnect with me. She also feared that I might have changed my feelings about her. I admit, I felt a bit uneasy at first, and it was one of the few times we didn't start with our usual closeness. However, we worked through it, and over the next few weeks, we fell back into our familiar rhythm. The only noticeable change was her growing belly. We went for a checkup when she was about 18 weeks along, and everything looked great. We learned we were having a girl, and I felt immense joy. Any worries about paternity faded away. Diana was visibly happy, and I think she felt relieved that I was so excited. We decorated the nursery next to our bedroom with soft pinks and purples and added beautiful decals for our daughter's future. I also decided it was time to address some family matters and reached out to Tim to arrange a visit with my mother and sister. I hadn't seen them since that difficult night. A few weeks earlier, I learned that Martha and Joan had been charged with multiple offenses and were set to go to court soon. They were in custody until the hearing. As for Roger and Greg, they were still missing. Initially, we heard they were across the border, but recent reports placed them closer to home. To be safe, we hired security guards for around-the-clock protection at our house and workplace. Diana and I each had personal panic buttons connected to GPS, so help could arrive quickly if needed. If we planned to go out, we informed our security team. Until Roger and Greg were apprehended, we felt nervous because of their past abusive actions. On a Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves in the visitors area of the local jail. Tim joined us and agreed to stay outside with Diana while I spoke with my mother first, and then my sister. The visitors' room looked much like what you might see in movies. Plain green walls, a metal table, and chairs attached to the floor. I noticed a video camera in one corner, but no one-way mirror was visible. The officer who brought me in mentioned that the room was monitored by video to ensure everyone's safety. About 5 minutes later, my mother was brought into the room. She wore brown coveralls and white shoes and had her hands restrained. They asked if I wanted her secured to the bench, but I said no. My mother seemed to have aged a lot in the past few months. Her hair was pulled back, but it looked unkempt. Her eyes appeared tired, and there were a few small scars on her lip. She sat down across from me, and the guard stepped out and closed the door. She looked at me, and I wasn't sure who would speak first, but she started. "How's Diana?" I expected her to ask about me or apologize for everything. I was surprised she asked about Diana first. "She's doing well. She's outside and she's expecting a baby." For a moment, her expression turned serious, then softened. "Pregnant? I don't know if I should ask." "You shouldn't. You've lost the right to be a mother with everything you've done, or allowed to happen to Diana and me. But to answer your question, we don't know for sure. We hope the baby is mine, but it could be Roger's or Greg's." She nodded, looking defeated. "Harry, I filled the silence. "Honestly, I don't know if I should call you Mum or Martha now. I'm really angry at all of you. You've hurt the woman I care about. There have been times I've called you worse names lately. A part of me wishes I could call you Mum, but I just don't feel you deserve that." She nodded again. "Martha is fine. And I know you'll want to ask, but yes, we're keeping the baby no matter what. If the baby isn't mine, I will love it completely, unlike how your husband treated me. This child will know love." "So Diana told you then?" "Yeah, the truth came out. How could you keep that from me, Mum? I mean, Martha. It seems everyone knew I wasn't Roger's son except me. How could you hide something like that for so long? I always thought I looked like your side of the family, but I was wrong, wasn't I?" She looked down for a moment, wiping some tears from her face. I didn't feel sorry for her. I had tissues, but I wasn't giving them to her. She gazed back at me as if thinking about what to say, then began explaining. She stared at the wall as she spoke about my past. When I was a teenager, I had a boyfriend named George. He was a thin guy, quite bright. He made me laugh and shared tender moments with me. But not long after high school, George and his family moved away. We tried to keep in touch for a while, but we both knew it wouldn't last, so we decided to part ways. Back then, not many women went to university, so I looked for a job and ended up working in bookkeeping for a construction company. I wasn't the best bookkeeper, but I managed well enough. While working there, I caught the attention of one of the workers, Roger. George and Roger were very different in how they treated me. George was easygoing and gentle, while Roger was more assertive and persistent. I ended up dating Roger for almost 6 months before I found out I was going to have a baby. Roger's father insisted that we get married, so we did, and soon after, I had Greg. Not long after Greg was born, George returned to town. At that time, Roger was busy starting his business and was off and away. George reached out and we reconnected. It was almost like high school again. George made me laugh in a way Roger never could. He brought me small gifts and made me feel cared for. I think that feeling, along with Roger being away and a few drinks, led George and me to spend the night together again. Unfortunately, I found out soon after that I was pregnant once more. I felt terrible about being unfaithful, but I never told Roger straight away. When you were born, Roger was thrilled. He had 2 sons, and he worked hard to provide for us, but he wasn't around much. So I raised both of you as best I could. I had a feeling you weren't Roger's son, so I got a DNA test that confirmed it. I never told George, but I felt a lot of guilt and ended up getting pregnant with Joan. About a month after Joan was born, Roger noticed you looked different. After a lot of questioning, I finally revealed to him that I had been with someone else, and that you were the result. That night was hard for me, and I think one reason I got through it was the sound of Joan crying, needing to be fed. I had to stay outside your room, rocking her to keep Roger from going in and harming anyone. After that, he pretty much disappeared for a month. After that, I never heard from him again. But the money kept coming for groceries and the house, so I focused on taking care of the 3 of you. When he came home, he wanted everything. He was distant with you. You were just 3 years old. One time, you went to him, arms open, asking for Daddy. He reached for you, but when you got close, he slapped you. I had to hurry to pick you up as you cried on the floor. I took you to your room and helped you calm down. When I came back out, he told me that if I didn't want my child to be in danger, I needed to keep you away from him. He warned me never to tell anyone. I think he worried about how being betrayed by his wife would look to others. So, I kept you away from him as much as I could. I think you were about 8 when Roger told Greg about you. Greg had a nasty side like Roger, and that's when you really started facing trouble from him. I nodded. That seemed about right. Roger told me to let you learn to stand up for yourself. If I tried to help, both you and I would be thrown out. So, I let Greg hurt you. If he couldn't do it for some reason, Roger would bring me over, and then Greg got to hit me until I was red. Later that night, Roger would forcefully take me. Over the years, I wished you would run away. But you didn't. Instead, you stayed and took the beatings. I was proud that you were strong, but sad that you never tried to escape. That's because I had no friends. Roger, Greg, and Joan made sure of that. I was foolish enough to defend Greg and hide my bruises because I thought family looked out for one another. I learned that's not true for us, even with my mother. My words hit hard, but again she nodded. You're right, she sighed. I won't make excuses for what I did. I deserve your anger, but you deserve to know the truth. Now it was my turn to sigh, and she continued. When you got the scholarship, I was so happy. Finally, you could get away from this family and find your own path. I hoped to see you free. When you started dating Diana, my joy grew. She proudly claimed you as hers and stood up to your father, sorry, Roger, when he tried to pressure her. A small smile appeared on her lips. I was proud of her that day. Few people have stood up to Roger over the years. The only other time someone got one up on him was when you made your discovery and filed for your patent, I interrupted. Right. Your patent. When you submitted for that, and Roger understood its importance, he was furious. She took a shaky breath, sharing more about the harsh treatment she'd endured over the years, revealing the control and cruelty Roger had exerted over her and others in the family. Her voice was empty of expectation or self-pity, simply recounting the events. I'm not looking for sympathy, Harry, she said, her tone hollow. I just want you to know what happened. She explained how Roger's intentions took a dark turn after he saw I was finding success on my own, my new job, a better car, and a fresh start. He couldn't stand that I wasn't sharing my life or income with the family. It frustrated him that I wasn't under his control anymore, as he had always believed I was. With the support of Greg and Joan, he devised a plan to seize control over me and, in his mind, take what he thought he was owed. When you had that argument and left, Roger went over the edge. He was determined to get Diana involved in his scheme, thinking it would somehow bring him closer to controlling your life. He figured if he could manipulate you and Diana, he'd gain access to everything you had worked for. She took another deep breath. When Diana came by that day to pick up some papers related to your family history, Joan saw an opportunity. She called Roger and Greg and then tampered with Diana's drink, making sure she wouldn't be able to leave. I stayed in the background, unable to stop what was unfolding. When they arrived, I was sent to a separate room, forced to remain silent. She paused, struggling to continue, then looked at me with genuine regret. I should have done more to protect her, but fear held me back. I knew they were capable of anything, and I was terrified. When you called, I sent that message hoping you'd believe she wasn't there, but I didn't know they planned for you to find her like that. I am deeply sorry, Harry, for all of it. For the first time, I saw true remorse in her eyes, regret for what had happened to Diana, and the pain caused. Her words weighed heavily, but I felt a renewed resolve to make sure both Diana and I could finally find peace and move forward, free from the darkness that had surrounded us. "I'm to blame for everything because I wasn't honest," she said quietly, not once looking at me. I noticed her brown prison uniform was stained darker with tears. "I think I can accept that," I replied. She continued, "I assume you know most of the story by now. With Diana still with you, there must be some things you figured out." "Yeah, but I still have a few questions. I will do my best to answer them." "Okay. Did Roger have a relationship with Joan?" "Yes, since she was old enough. Roger also made Greg hurt me and forced me to do things I would rather forget. Please don't ask me about those details. I would prefer to leave that part behind." "I understand. My next question is about the DNA report and the letter from my real father. Can I have those?" She smiled, a genuine warmth I hadn't seen from her in a long time. "Yes, Harry, you can have them. I plan to get them for Diana, but they're still hidden under a false panel in my winter clothes drawer. If you can visit the house and ask my lawyer for access, you can retrieve them. Unfortunately, I don't think you'll be leaving here anytime soon." "I don't think so either." This next question is hard for me to ask. Did I ever do something wrong that made you stop caring? Before I could pull my hands away from the table, she reached out and touched my hands with her own. "No, Harry. You didn't do anything wrong. It was me who made mistakes. I thought by keeping my distance and taking the brunt of the abuse, I could protect you from the worst. I was wrong. I believed I was doing my best to keep you safe, but I see now that my view was limited. I love you, sweetie, and I know this might mean little to you now, but I really do. I am so proud of all you have achieved. You are far better than my husband. I may never get to say this again, but I love you, and I will always love you. I regret everything. You are my son, and I have made a mess of things. Still, if today has helped you find some understanding and closure, that is all I can hope for." With that, our conversation came to an end. She pulled her hands back, and we shared a prolonged look. Finally, she stood, walked to the door, and a guard came to open it. As she stepped through, she turned back to me. "One last thing, my dear. They may have called you a mistake, but you are not. You were born from the love between George and me. You are my greatest achievement, and if we never speak again, know that I will always be proud of the man you have become." With that, she left. I sat there for a few minutes, realizing that my mother had faced her own struggles, perhaps even worse than mine. It seemed she had endured a lot at home. My family was deeply troubled. It wasn't long before there was a knock on the door. "You ready for the next visitor?" the guard asked. "Yes. Bring her in." If my mother looked bad, Joan looked even worse, wearing the same coveralls. She sat down at the table and glared at me. Her hair was short and messy, and she had a new scar on her cheek. It seemed like she hadn't slept in days. When she wasn't glaring, she looked around the room as if she expected something to jump out at her. For someone who seemed to have had it all, this must have been a shocking change for her. After talking with my mother, I could see her perspective. But Joan, who was supposed to be my sister, was still a mystery to me. I didn't start the conversation. "You know, there are a lot of people in here who know who you are," Joan said matter-of-factly. "And why should I care about that?" I replied. "Many of their family members work for you or one of your suppliers. It seems you're quite well known around town. You're young, rich, and you create many jobs. You also help charities, including those that assist people to get back on their feet. I'm aware of that, Joan. I put in a lot of effort to support the community. After how I grew up, I want to help people. If it takes my time, money, or hard work, so be it. There it is, the self-righteous person that my family raised. You're not even a true member of the family. You're so caught up in your own world that you don't care about us. I've been in here almost a month, and all I hear is how great you are at helping everyone. Yet during this time, you've done nothing to help me. I tilted my head, puzzled by her last words. Help you, Joan? After everything you have done to Diana and me, why would you think I would want to help you? If my words hurt her, she didn't show it. Because I'm your sister? You should protect me and use your money and influence to get me out of here. Why would I want to do that? I'm still your sister. Don't you care about me? A few of the people here learned about what happened with Diana, and they came to find me at night and made me do things. I never thought she would be so against it, considering she had made my wife and mother do similar things. But I guess it feels different when roles are reversed. Joan, let me be clear. Do not ever call my wife that name again. You, your father, and your brother treated her horribly, and it was against her will. She is the victim here, not you. And as for helping you, you can forget it. After what you did to Diana and how you treated me, you have the nerve to ask for help. I laughed loudly, and she pulled back. Remember, a long time ago when your father was at work. Your brother was too busy with his own life to teach you how to ride a bike, and you asked me for help. Do you remember that bike? It was a girl's first bike, with tassels on the handles, a basket, and a big bell that you loved to ring. Since no one else would help, I spent weeks teaching you how to ride. Those were some of the best memories of my childhood. I felt helpful, and you were happy to have me around. I got to be a big brother, and you were my little sister who loved me. We rode around the neighborhood together, just having fun. But then, I noticed you started to change. I think your father and brother must have told you things about me that I didn't know until recently. Suddenly you grew distant, and you didn't want to ride anymore. I kept asking you to go for rides. But one day when I asked again, you told me, and I quote, "Leave me alone. If you think I will ride with someone like you, you are dreaming." That was the day my sister stopped being part of my life. Since then, you haven't even noticed or cared that I stopped talking to you. Every talk we had became indirect. Even your brother spoke to me directly, but you didn't. You took the love I had for you and threw it away. It died with that one sentence, and you never tried to fix it. You can't accept that you're in here because of your own choices. So no, Joan, I won't help you. In fact, I will make sure you pay for what you did. You say there are criminals here. Well, take a good look in the mirror. And about those programs I helped support, I will ensure that if they assist you, I will stop my funding for them. I stood up. This meeting was nearly over. I requested this meeting to see if you feel any regret for your actions. After everything that happened, I really wanted to know if you felt any guilt about what you did to my wife, or if you ever cared about me at all. But from the moment you entered, you didn't ask about Diana, or even acknowledge me. You didn't try to apologize, or show any sign of regret. All you cared about was your own interests. No, Joan, you are out of my life, and you need to get used to being here because, given all you have done, you will be here for quite a while. And as for money, you won't receive a penny from me. When I leave, I hope we never meet again. I took a small item from my pocket and placed it on the desk. It was a little figure of a bike, just like the one I taught her to ride. But I will leave you with this memory, a reminder of happier times when a brother and sister learned to ride together. I will mourn the sister I lost that day. I will always cherish the moments we spent on our bike. I'm sure you will remember me for a long time. Goodbye, Joan. I knocked on the door and the guard led me out. My last sight of Joan was her head down, the little bike figure resting on the table. In the reception area, Diana and Tim were sitting and quietly talking. They both stood as I approached. Diana hugged me, her very pregnant belly pressing against me. "How did it go?" Tim asked. In some ways, it went as I expected. In others, it was surprising. I think my mother truly regrets everything that happened. She didn't ask for help or shift blame. Instead, she took responsibility for everything. She also mentioned that she has faced hardships at the hands of Roger, Greg, and Joan more than Diana and I did. Diana gasped. What surprised me is that she asked about Diana first. I looked down at my pregnant wife and smiled. Joan, on the other hand, was different. She wanted me to free her but didn't try to make amends or ask anything. I think Roger has really influenced her thoughts about me, and I will make sure the charges against Joan stick. I pointed to the prison walls. In my opinion, she can stay here. We talked for a while, and I could tell Tim wanted to share something important. Guys, I received a report overnight that one of the trucks from Roger's company was stolen last night. Security footage shows two people that look a lot like Roger and Greg breaking in. We're being extra cautious, and our community watch is keeping an eye out. Please be careful over the next few days. We promised to stay alert, and both Diana and I made sure to have our safety devices on us. I also called our security company to increase patrols around our home and office just in case. It had been a tough afternoon. The conversations with my mother and Joan had worn me out, and with my pregnant wife, Diana, she also tired quickly. So we were relieved to head home. I looked forward to a simple dinner and some cozy time in front of the TV with Diana. We got to my Mustang, and I helped Diana into the car. As I did, I realized I needed a different car, something easier for getting kids in and out. While I loved my Mustang, it wasn't practical for a family. Maybe a Jeep or a Range Rover would work. But then I thought a four-door V8 might also be fun. Just as we were about to leave the parking lot, Diana began to ask questions. "Harry, are you really done with your mother and sister?" I paused to think. With Joan, no. I don't see any way to fix that. Things were said that I regret, especially to someone I used to see as a sister. But I can't take those words back either. As for my mother, I'm not sure. I felt like she was honest with me this time. And if she is telling the truth, she has been through more than we realize. A lot of what she said matches what you told me in the hospital. I snapped my fingers. Oh, she mentioned where I could find a DNA report and a letter from my real father. I felt a wave of sadness. She also said that my real father was the true love of her life. I don't know how much she really loved Roger, or if she felt stuck because of us kids. I have mixed feelings about Roger, so I can't judge that clearly. Part of me wants to forgive her. I think she cares but didn't see a way out. As we reached an intersection, traffic was light, and we were stopped at a red light, talking about our day. Feeling drained but hopeful about the future. Suddenly, a truck came charging toward us. Instead of going through the intersection as it should have, it swerved. In the fading light, its headlights were aimed right at my driver's side. I could see Greg behind the wheel, a wild grin on his face, with Roger next to him cheering. They say there are moments in life where everything seems to slow down. and you reflect before a big moment happens. I felt time slow down, but I didn't see my life flash before me, which was a relief. I had to think fast, or I might not make it. The way Greg was driving, it seemed like they were about to crash straight into my door, and I knew I had to react quickly. As it was, the impact from the truck could seriously hurt Diana, who was sitting next to me. Without thinking, I pressed the gas pedal hard, and the powerful engine of the Mustang roared to life. The car sped through the intersection quickly, but it wasn't enough. The truck had a lot of speed while I was starting from a halt. They hit the back of my car, and I shouted, "Hold on!" The sound of metal bending and plastic stretching filled the air. We spun out of control, the Mustang still trying to move forward but now sliding sideways. We spun once, twice, and almost a third time before coming to a stop. We looked at each other. "Are you okay? Did you get hurt?" I asked Diana. She shook her head. "I don't think I'm hurt. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I think so." I took out my emergency button, held it up to her, and pressed it. She did the same, and we both saw the small lights shining on each device, meaning they were activated. Hopefully, help would arrive soon. "It's Roger and Greg. They hit us." I looked around the car and saw that the truck had ended up right in front of us after the spin. We were almost facing the way we had come. Luckily, we hadn't spun far enough to tip over the traffic island. However, the truck crashed into the traffic light pole after bumping off my Mustang. I observed Roger and Greg as they seemed a bit dazed but were getting out of the truck. I wasn't sure if we should stay in the car, get out, or confront them. Staying inside seemed safer. The windows were still intact, which was surprising given the crash, although my window had a big crack. On the other hand, running away would be tough with Diana expecting a baby, and I couldn't hold my own in a fight against both of them. I thought it might be better to stall for time by talking to them. If I could keep them occupied, help might come. I decided that trying to delay them was the best choice. "Di, please trust me." I opened the door and stepped out, carefully walking around the car to avoid the debris. Pieces of my Mustang lay scattered on the ground, along with parts from the truck. I made my way to the passenger side of the car where Roger and Greg could see me, but I pretended I hadn't noticed who they were. I needed to act casually to buy us some time. I wanted them to think I was unaware that they were the ones who had hit us. I walked over to Diana's door and pulled it open, helping her stand up. Then I turned to face the two men in front of us and stopped. They stood relaxed, looking fine after the accident, but their faces were tired, their beards messy, and their clothes old and worn. It seemed like they had lost a lot of weight and muscle from their time doing construction work. There was a wildness in their eyes, like they were losing control, but what caught my attention was what they were holding. Both had a cheap-looking shotgun in their hands. I moved Diana and me so the car door could protect us a little. They were still about 30 meters away, but with guns, you could never be too sure. Well, look who it is," Greg said, pointing at my car. "It seems you've had an accident. Lucky for you, we came by." His smile seemed real on the surface, but there was something darker beneath it. "Enough, Greg," Roger snapped back, then stared at me. They held their guns loosely for now. "You owe me, boy. You and your friend. You shouldn't have gone to the police. I told you to stay quiet. After everything I've done for you, treating you like family, you owe me." "I owe you nothing," I shot back, thinking it was better not to engage with them. "Nothing? How about all the years I took care of you? How I fed you, clothed you, let you live under my roof?" I stepped closer, ignoring the danger they posed with their guns, feeling my anger build. Since I had spoken up, I might as well keep going. I knew help was coming soon. "How about the years of mistreatment. The hits, the bruises, the insults. You were a terrible father. You couldn't even acknowledge me as your son. He laughed. Haven't you figured it out? You're not my son and you never were. I let you live because of my kindness. My wife betrayed me while I worked hard for our family, then hid it until it was too late. You're a mistake, unwanted, like something stuck to my shoe that I can't get rid of. He waved the gun around, but didn't aim it at me. When he saw my reaction, or my lack of it, his expression changed. His eyes narrowed. Looks like someone filled you in, huh? Was it your mother or the woman standing next to you now? Like she's something special. Did she tell you she wasn't faithful to you? That she has a past? Diana started to speak up, but I couldn't help but laugh at the situation. Wow. Just wow. You are one of the saddest people I've ever known. Yes. Diana and I found out the truth. You're not my father. And yes, Diana has been through a lot, but she's stronger because of it, and I love her for that. But it was me who realized you never acted like a father. Real dads look out for their kids, support them, celebrate their wins, and help them when they fall. So no, you were never my dad. And standing here now, I don't regret that one bit. But do you know what's even worse, Roger? It's that you're so lost in your own bitterness that you don't even see the harm you've done to everyone around you, including your own family. I know the truth, not the lies you keep spinning. Roger scoffed. So you think you're smart, but that doesn't change the fact that you still owe me, boy. He raised his weapon, and I stepped out, motioning for Deanna to stay behind the cover of the door, my hands raised. I wanted to protect her, no matter what happened. So, is this your desperate way of collecting some sort of payment from me? I challenged. If it's all about money, trying to kill me makes no sense at all. Roger laughed. You don't get it, do you? I don't care about you. I only care about what's left behind. With you gone, everything will eventually come my way. Your logic is twisted, I replied calmly. Long before any of this madness started, I made sure you wouldn't be able to touch a cent of my money. I arranged everything so that no one from your circle could ever benefit. After what you did, my funds are now set up to ensure you face justice, to see you locked away so deep that you won't ever have the chance to hurt anyone again. My words seemed to hit a nerve, but Roger only laughed louder, his tone dark. He sneered, looking past me to Diana, who stood behind the door. You're fooling yourself. The pain must be eating you up inside. Face it, boy, you're just trying to act brave. But deep down, I know you're broken. I took a deep breath, holding my ground, and laughed back, feeling my resolve grow. I needed more time, and I thought I should take some action. It was risky, but it might help Diana. I let out a loud laugh, drawing in deep breaths. Roger and Greg stopped, and Diana jumped as if I had startled her. Roger, you really are foolish, you know that. That child isn't yours or Greg's, it's mine. You hurt my lovely wife, but she was already expecting. We had been thinking about having a baby for over 2 months, and she stopped taking her birth control a month before. We were intimate twice that day before your daughter gave my wife something that made her sleepy. And honestly, I glanced down at them. We all know you two aren't exactly impressive in that area. I don't think either of you could get close enough to a woman. My wife certainly deserves someone who can. I had pushed them, insulted their pride, and made it clear I was better than them in that way. Anger was on both their faces, but there was also embarrassment. In the distance, I saw lights coming closer, but I doubted they would reach us in time. I knew I had to do something daring. I raised my hand as they pointed their weapons at me. Wait, stop, I said, trying to sound lighthearted like I was not a threat. They lowered their weapons a little, but I couldn't resist one more jab. Roger, tell me, Did your mom have to get help to have Greg and Joan? Because I know my real dad took good care of her. I've heard he was quite impressive. He was caring and made sure she felt good. You, on the other hand, don't seem to meet the mark. I smiled, sensing that with just a little more teasing, Roger would lose his cool. I hear you're so lacking that she needs extra help, which surprises me because you seem to lack in some areas. While a son shouldn't know the details of his mother's love life, I learned this afternoon that you struggle to please her even when she's really wanting to feel good. I wouldn't be shocked if, when she gets out, she decides to leave you for my real father. I had stirred them up just as I planned, keeping the focus away from Diana. Roger aimed his gun at me, and Greg tried to do the same. George Daniels isn't half the man I am. But after I'm done with you, I'll know who to go after next. His finger moved to pull the trigger, and I dove. He thought I would go straight for Diana, but I dove forward instead, heading straight for him and some scattered car parts. I got hit by a few shotgun pellets, and my shoulder and back hurt a lot. Still, I couldn't stop. Diana and I both depended on my next move. I was desperate to get out of the way of danger. I landed among the car parts from the crash, including a rear wheel guard. Without thinking much, I picked it up with the momentum of my dive and tried to throw it toward where Greg stood. His shot missed me, but I managed to knock the weapon from his hand, giving him a moment to recover. Knowing time was short, I grabbed another piece of debris next to me, which was part of my wrecked Mustang's tailpipe. It was sharp and metallic. I moved closer to Roger. Holding the tailpipe, I lifted myself up, ready to defend myself. By this time, Roger had reloaded and aimed right at me as I got to my feet. He seemed ready to end things in one last moment. "Goodbye," he shouted. I swung the tailpipe up just as he fired at me. The shot missed but went off near my left ear. Shotguns are really loud, but I didn't have time to think. I was right in front of Roger, who was off balance. I pushed him back with the tailpipe, and he fell. I kept moving, bringing the sharp edge down to use it as a weapon. Roger had tried to ruin my life and hurt people I cared about, and I wanted to stop him. As I aimed down, I let all my pain and feelings of betrayal fuel my action. Roger saw what was coming. His shotgun was too far away, and even if he could reach it, it wouldn't help him. My anger gave me strength. Time seemed to slow, just like before the accident, and I felt that the end was near. But just as my makeshift spear got close to him, something hard hit me from the side. Greg had given up his weapon and charged at me, pushing me off course. As I rolled, I saw the lights of our help getting closer, but I still wasn't sure if they would reach us in time. I found myself facing two opponents, and I felt unsure if I would make it out alive. But at least Diana would be safe. I was starting to feel dizzy because of my shoulder and back injury. Greg was back on his feet after tackling me. He was stomping around angrily. "Big mistake! Let's go! I'll wipe the floor with you and be with your woman before you're even cold." I wasn't sure how I could get past this. Greg was much bigger than me, even if he had been running for a while. I had injuries, and blood was everywhere. My only advantage earlier had been surprise. Plus, Greg knew how to fight. Things did not look good for me. He waited for me to get up, likely eager to knock me down again and feel powerful. But luck, finally, turned in my favor. As I put my hand down, I felt a shotgun that Rogers had left behind. A spark of hope lit up as I stood up and loaded the next round, pointing the weapon at Greg. He came charging at me with a fierce look and something sharp in his hand. "Get lost, Greg!" I yelled, and I pulled the trigger. He was caught off guard as the shots hit him in the chest, and he fell to the ground. I moved to aim the gun at Rogers, only to see that he had passed out. It seemed my earlier action had hurt his arm. Blood was starting to collect on the ground around him. He looked like he was in shock. Well, that was his problem too. Cars were speeding toward us and they would arrive any moment. I hurried back to Diana and found her lying on her side, struggling to breathe, with blood around her. Her gaze was unfocused, and her breaths were getting weaker. Her back was covered in wounds from the shotgun pellets. It looked like she had been hurt during the fight. I wasn't sure how serious it was. There were many spots on her upper back, bleeding. Thankfully, it seemed that the car door had shielded her lower half, including the baby, but she was still hurt. I felt helpless. The energy was draining from me with every move. My shoulder was badly hurt, and like Diana, my back was bleeding in multiple places. I collapsed beside her, my last bit of strength gone. I think she felt my presence and knew it was me. I helped her rest her head in my lap. For a moment, she focused her eyes on me, and we lost ourselves in each other's gaze. No words were needed, and that moment felt like it lasted forever. As we looked into each other's faces, I felt a deep, unconditional love between us. She was my soulmate, and I was entirely hers. But I felt helpless. She lifted a bloody hand to touch my cheek softly, tears streaming down her face. "Harry, I love you," she said, then closed her eyes. My daughter arrived just a few hours after the chaos, when both Diana and I were hurt. The stress of everything caused her to be born early, and I missed the delivery because I was in surgery, under anesthesia, having pieces removed from my shoulder and back, and getting my shoulder fixed. I was in surgery for more than 12 hours and didn't wake up for over 2 days. I lost consciousness right before our security team reached us. The ambulance came quickly, and both Diana and I were taken for surgery. I later learned that Diana was in surgery for about 20 hours. Her labor lasted only 3 hours, and thankfully, everything went smoothly despite the trauma. After that, she was moved to have surgery to fix her back. During the incident, I didn't notice that Greg had managed to hit Diana while I was dealing with Roger. The shot struck her back as she tried to crouch down. Greg then came to confront me before I could reach his father. We nearly lost Diana 3 times in surgery. While her injuries weren't life-threatening, she lost a lot of blood during childbirth, which left her very weak. I was the first to wake up, both of us in separate beds in the same room we had been in before. 5 people were there with us, not including the doctors. Jack and Cindy were snoozing on the couch across the room. June was by Diana, who was asleep, while Norman sat on a chair between our beds, reading something. What surprised me was the person holding my hand in an orange jumpsuit. My mother was there. She was handcuffed to the bed and resting her head on my mattress, but her hand was holding mine tightly. I didn't know what to think, but I needed something first. I tried to speak. "Water," I whispered, but it came out more like a soft groan. Still, it got everyone's attention, and soon they gathered around me. Then, Dr. Hill walked in. Someone must have called her. "Harry, welcome back. Can you look into the light for me, please?" She checked a few things and was pleased to see I was waking up. They gave me a small cup of water and I took a sip. "Diana?" I managed to ask quietly. Dr. Hill gave me a small, reassuring smile. "She is in her bed to your right, still asleep, but we believe she will recover well after her successful delivery and surgery." Delivery? This time everyone smiled wider. "Harry, you're a dad to a tiny but beautiful baby girl. Congratulations. She is in the special care ward, and I think you will be able to visit her in a couple of days." After she left, everyone gathered around my bed. I saw looks of concern for me, happiness that Diana and I were okay, and some anger about what had happened. Eventually, after a few jokes about how I looked like I had been hit by a truck, we all laughed, and my mother spoke. "What happened, dear?" A few hours after you left, I got a message saying you were in an accident. I told them how Roger and Greg had bumped into us with their truck after we left. They must have been waiting for us and chose the right moment to act. I explained how I had shot Greg when he rushed at me and how I had hit Roger when he missed me up close. I also told them how I found Diana by the car and then collapsed. I glanced over at Diana in her hospital bed. She was awake, staring at me with tears in her eyes. Jack quickly ran out to get Dr. Hill, who returned to check on Diana. No one interrupted him. Throughout it all, Diana's gaze stayed on me. When she learned our baby girl was born, tears streamed down her face. Her voice was faint, but she faintly remembered the delivery, although not the moment our baby was born or that she survived. So, can anyone explain what happened after Diana and I passed out? Norman spoke up. I think I can. I arrived about 10 minutes after the first responders. I had been alerted that both you and Diana had pressed your emergency buttons, and a team was on the way. When I got there, both of you were being placed on stretchers. The scene was chaotic. The police finished their investigation this morning, and I believe Tim will want to talk to both of you at some point to confirm everything. From what I understand, the intersection is still closed. Once you were both stable in the ambulances, you were brought here for care. I stayed at the scene knowing you were in good hands. June, Jack, and Cindy came to be with you both and haven't left your sides. You probably know your Mustang is damaged beyond repair. There was also a lot of blood and debris everywhere. Once the news got out about the accident, the fight, and the involvement of guns, the media went wild. When they discovered it was local celebrity Harry Other, our city's youngest millionaire, they went into a frenzy. I have received media requests all day long. I've even had movie studios contact me. They want to buy the rights. Despite my injury, I laughed. Diana joined in, saying, "Who would want to buy the rights to my life? It hasn't been fun, but it's also sad." I wondered, "Norman, what happened to Roger and Greg?" Norman paused for a moment, then looked at Martha. My mom nodded. Greg died at the scene. The ambulance team tried to help him, but his injuries were too serious. The police have some ideas about what happened, and I believe you won't be charged since it seems like self-defense. Our legal team is already addressing it. There's a traffic camera that caught most of it. The video isn't great, but it matches what you just said, and I'm sure the police will want to hear your side. I nodded. I had disliked Greg deeply, and felt he deserved to feel pain for all the trouble he had caused me over the years. But it was strange to think that I had been involved in his death. Surprisingly, it was my mother who helped ease my mind. While I was in the hospital, handcuffed to my bed, there was a police officer outside my door. "Harry, please don't feel bad about that," she said. "It was bound to come down to you and him. While I am heartbroken to have lost a son, I believe he got what he deserved. And I also know that the son we all hurt is still alive. When you told me what happened, even though I cared for Greg, I think I would have done whatever it took to protect you." She cried, and I held her hand. "Mom, why are you here?" She wiped her tears but continued to cry. "It was Norman and Tim's idea. I am still facing a trial next month, but when I found out you and Diana were in surgery, they asked if I would come to see you under guard before my hearing. I regret what we did to you and Diana, and I meant it when I said I would carry this shame forever. But when they brought you in, I lost it. That's why I'm here," she said, lifting her handcuffed hands to show me. "I just wanted to be with you. I am so sorry for everything I did to you. I'm sorry to you too, Diana. I regret not being the mother I should have been. I should have protected you from Roger, from Greg, from Joan. I wish I had stood up for you and just left with you. am sorry, and I know I may never earn your forgiveness. But I will always love you. Now that you're both awake, I guess they'll take me back." Before she could finish, I raised my hand with the IV line still attached. This situation was complicated. "Mom, I forgive you. I know we have a lot to work through, and our family is different now. But I forgive you." She cried again. It was more than she expected, and I was surprised I was ready to forgive in that moment. As I thought about everything people had said to me over the past months, I realized my mother had also suffered from Roger and his children. She had been hurt and threatened. She had to follow his orders, or else he threatened my life. She had been involved in a troubling situation with 2 of her 3 kids, and had even been jailed for it. Because of all this, I felt I should try to forgive her. "What about Roger?" I asked. I noticed a smile on Norman's face. "Well, he's still alive, but he lost his right arm and has undergone 2 surgeries. He got hurt badly when you attacked him with that car part. He needs 2 more surgeries because of an infection in his arm. He's under strict police guard and will likely spend the rest of his life in prison." My mother added, "I've talked to my lawyer. Once Roger is stable, I will divorce him for his wrongdoings. I don't know which reasons will hold up in court, but I should have done this years ago. I know I have to serve my time, but I will not be linked to him anymore. I never really loved him, but I stayed because of the kids and didn't know how to leave. The divorce settlement won't be much, but at least I will feel free in some ways." June then handed me a manila envelope. Inside, I found a folded paper and another envelope. "Is this what I think it is?" I asked. June nodded at my mother. "Yesterday, when the police brought her in while you were sleeping, your mom asked me to get these for you." I looked at my mom, and she encouraged me to open it. Everyone watched as I opened the DNA test results. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to see. I studied chemistry, not biology, so I decided to close it for now. I would ask someone for help later. I then opened the letter and started to read. "Harry, if you're reading this, you have been told that Roger is not your real father. My name is George Daniels, and I want you to know that I am your biological father. Your mother and I were together in high school, but fate separated us. We came together for a short time, and you were born. However, since your mother was married and had a child, we decided to end our relationship. I hope to watch you grow from a distance and someday meet you and introduce you to my family. I wish you to take pride in knowing that we value intelligence and hard work. We all enjoy a challenge, and I hope this will be part of you too. Harry, you are my first child, and I'm uncertain if you will have any siblings when you read this. But if you do, then I hope we can all meet together. You will always be in my heart. Lots of love always, my son." George Daniels. I felt like I had been moving between anger and sadness for months. But now, I had tears in my eyes again. And this time, they were tears of happiness. I had a real father. I showed the letter to my mom, and she cried too. I then called over Jack and Norman to share the letter with them. After Diana had mentioned his name to me months ago, I had my suspicions, but Jack confirmed it. Harry George is my older brother. There's a big age gap, but that's his handwriting, so that means I'm your uncle, I finished. And Norman, that makes you my second cousin. I've thought of both of you as family ever since you helped me in high school. You were always there for me when I needed support. Wow. I can't hide anything anymore. We all laughed. Mom looked at Jack with surprise. "George is your older brother?" Jack nodded, and for a few minutes we listened to them share stories about the brother they knew. Soon after, Tim came in with another officer, and it was time for my mom to go back to prison. She looked at Diana and me, waiting to be handcuffed. I can't tell you how proud I am of both of you. I promise to spend every moment working towards forgiveness, she said. Diana surprised everyone by asking Martha for a hug before she left. Once she was gone, everyone began to leave, now that the immediate crisis was over. For the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay. It was around 7 in the evening when the next surprise came. 3 nurses and Dr. Hill wheeled in a special crib, and inside was our daughter. One of the nurses helped me out of bed and brought my drip to the crib, while another nurse did the same for Diana. Then they left us alone for a few minutes. It was a bit hard to hug, but holding hands made me feel so much better. I could tell Diana felt the same way. "Charlotte," Diana said, watching our daughter sleep. It was the second name on our list. Beth was our favorite, but looking at our little girl with sensors attached to her and a tube for her breathing, it felt right to name her Charlotte. As we held hands, we knew she was ours, not just as parents, but by blood. We hadn't even been able to hold her yet, but I felt certain she was neither Roger's nor Greg's child. She was mine. The following month was tough. Diana and I had a lot of healing to do. There were many loose ends to tie up, and we had a little one to care for. Charlotte, whom we fondly called Charlie, spent up to 3 months in a special crib before her lungs grew strong enough for her to breathe on her own. It could take another 2 months before she could come home with us. Diana and I were filled with joy when Charlie was taken off the ventilator, and we held our little girl for the first time. To show our gratitude, Norman and I made a significant donation to the premature babies ward for all they had done. We also received DNA test results confirming what we already believed. I was Charlie's biological father. While we were recovering in the hospital, Jack brought his son, George, to meet us. Diana and I were amazed by how much George looked like me. We could also see the family resemblance between Jack and me. George seemed wise and calm. He told us he had followed my career quietly and didn't want to get involved before. He was a widower, having lost his wife 3 years earlier to cancer, but he had a son and a daughter. He promised to introduce us once we were home. His kids already knew about me, so there would be no surprises. I was a little nervous about meeting them since my last 2 siblings had made things difficult for me. However, when I did meet them, we quickly became good friends. My half-sister Megan joined Norman and me in public relations within a year and is now in charge of our public image. My half-brother George Jr. is an academic researcher who enjoys sharing a glass of wine while discussing various theories. The last thing that happened before our release was the court date for my family. Both Diana and I were helped by hospital staff, including Dr. Hill. Norman, Jack, George, and a couple of others joined us, and we had a security team nearby for safety. As we entered the courtroom, we sat in the back. One reason we were there was because we might be asked to provide evidence. My arm was in a sling and my back was itchy but healing. Diana also had some back pain, but was getting better. The 3 defendants were brought in one by one. Roger and Joan had public defenders, but I had hired a lawyer to support my mother. The judge struck his gavel and began the meeting. I appreciate everyone's presence today. Please note that this is a closed court due to the sensitive topic and the serious nature of the events. Each defendant has a separate lawyer and has asked to be tried individually. Does the prosecution agree? An older man with several aides stood up and spoke to the judge. We do, Your Honor. This was a criminal case, so it was the state against each defendant. Joan was the first to stand. She looked a bit better than I remembered, although she still seemed down. She wore a plain suit that looked like it came from a thrift store and no makeup. She glanced at me a few times. The first time, she seemed surprised to see me there. The second time, she looked angry, realizing I would not help her. The last glance came later when the judge read the verdict, and she stared at me, but I couldn't tell what she was feeling. The lawyers went through the list of charges, explaining them and how they affected both sides. Diana was called as a witness, but we already had a statement prepared by our legal team, which the judge accepted. "With all the evidence presented, how does the accused plead?" the judge asked. Joan's lawyer stood with her. "On behalf of my client, I plead not guilty." Noted. Next was my mother. Again, everything was discussed, including her relationship that led to my birth. Her lawyer mentioned the difficulties she faced from Roger, Greg, and Joan. However, my mother admitted her part in the situation related to my wife's assault. Several times she looked at us, but didn't say anything. "With all the evidence presented, how does the accused plead?" the judge asked. Mom and her lawyer stood up. "On behalf of my client, I have been instructed to plead guilty." Noted. Then it was my former father's turn. He looked quite worn down. The stump of his arm was wrapped in bandages, and he limped as he walked in. He wore prison clothes instead of a suit, and he glared at us before sitting down. Once again, the lawyers took turns speaking, but I could tell that his public defender seemed to be just going through the motions. The lawyer's face turned red when the charges were read. He had heard about assault before, but the more serious charges were unexpected. One surprising issue was that my mother expressed a desire to settle the divorce during this hearing. The reasoning was clear. They would never live together again, and it was likely they would both be in prison for a long time. So she wanted to get it done. After hearing the case against my mother, and then the evidence against Roger, the judge allowed it. There wasn't much defense presented. Several prepared statements were read, and things did not look good for my former father. Even when the reasons for the divorce were shared, they made Roger seem like a bad person. "With all the evidence given, how does the accused plead?" asked the judge. Roger and his lawyer stood up. "On behalf of my client, I have been told to plead not guilty." Noted. The court will now take a break until 3 this afternoon, when I will announce the decision and sentencing. He hit his gavel and left. George was waiting outside for us. Norman and George took us to a small cafe that looked like it had seen better times. Still, they told us they had the best toasted sandwiches and milkshakes. George had taken Norman and his nephew there for good lunches when they were younger. With our group, including staff from the hospital and security, the place was nearly full. But the sandwiches really were great. Finally, at 3, we all returned to the courtroom. The judge entered and called us to order. This case has clear villains and victims, but there are also hidden heroes and people who are often not appreciated. Today, we have heard the stories of many individuals related to the 3 accused here, and I must admit that I have struggled to find the right way to deliver justice and the right punishment for each of them. On one hand, we have a family that could be broken apart by a wife's unfaithfulness, and the effects of this may last a long time. On the other hand, the family's chosen reaction was harmful and hurtful, instead of simply separating like many families might in this situation. When considering the long-term mistreatment of others and threats to their safety, including children, this court cannot ignore the unacceptable actions of certain individuals. It is also noted that these actions led to the loss of at least one life. Each of the accused has asked to be tried and sentenced separately. Therefore, this has happened, and my decisions reflect that. I now ask the accused and their lawyers to stand. In the case of the state versus Joan Other, this court finds you guilty of all charges and sentences you to at least 12 years in prison. You will not be eligible for parole for at least 8 years. Because of your lack of regret for your actions, I will send a report to be reviewed by the parole board before considering your case for parole. In the case of the State versus Martha Other, this court finds you guilty of all charges, except for mental harm against Mrs. Diana Other and Mr. Harry Other. This court also acknowledges your plea of guilty and your acceptance of what you did. Additionally, I have a statement from your son, Mr. Harry Other, and your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Deanna Other, supporting your good character once everything became known. Lastly, the court recognizes the mistreatment you endured in the household. This court decides that Mrs. Martha Other will serve 5 years in prison with a chance for early release in 1 year. In the case of the State against Roger Other, this court finds you guilty of all charges and sentences you to life in prison. The court will not allow for parole due to the serious nature of your actions against multiple individuals, including your wife, Mr. Harry Other, and even your late son. These acts show manipulation that is among the worst I have seen in this courtroom. In closing, I want to commend Mr. Harry Other and Mrs. Diana Other for their bravery. As we heard the evidence, it became clear how much they faced. Every time they encountered difficulty, they supported each other instead of stepping away. Their bond showed strength in a world that often tries to divide us. We are honored to have them here. Bailiff, please take the defendants into custody. The gavel struck one last time, and it was over. Epilogue. A couple of months later, we brought Charlotte home, and that afternoon, we hosted a big celebration at our house. Our friends, co-workers, and many family members from George's side attended. Charlotte was a wonderful baby, and everyone agreed she was adorable. We visited my mother once a month, sometimes bringing Charlotte along. She was in a low-security prison and was always so proud to hold her granddaughter. Every visit ended with big hugs and kisses for Charlotte, as if she was trying to make up for lost time. My mother started working with support groups in prison to help herself and others who had experienced similar situations. When she completed her year and was released, we threw a big welcome home party. It was a bit different. Growing up, my mother had seemed distant. But once free from Roger's control, she transformed into a kind, loving person who cared for everyone. She would hug and kiss me every chance she got. She stayed with Diana and me for 2 years afterward, which we really appreciated. Charlotte was just over a year old, and we had just learned that Diana was expecting again. Having Grandma around was a great support. After her release, my mother visited Joan every couple of months. However, I heard that Joan was still very self-focused, and even my mother was starting to feel tired of the blame and excuses. She never visited Roger again, and I heard things were tough for him where he was. I got to know George well. We both loved learning, and although I never called him Dad, we had a strong bond. He spent a lot of time at our home, and at first, I thought it was just for me. But one night, I had to chuckle when Diana was close to having our second child, and I caught George quietly leaving my mother's room. Not long after the court case, Jack and Cindy got engaged. Then, Diana had our son, Harry Jr. Jack and Cindy got married 3 months later. I was Jack's best man, and Diana was Cindy's maid of honor. Charlotte looked adorable as the flower girl. We soon learned that Cindy was already expecting, so their first baby would arrive in less than 6 months. Work was going well. As life settled into a new routine, I finally completed the new parts needed to make our work more efficient. It had taken me over a year to finish that project, and I felt proud to get it done. Plus, we expanded our business, and more companies began to request our products. Diana and I continued to invest in each other. Of course, we had our arguments like any couple. We often disagreed over small things and sometimes had big fights about leaving the kitchen messy or forgetting to buy milk. But we never let our arguments stop us from talking. We also picked up a helpful tip. When you're upset, consider being more relaxed before continuing the discussion. Looking at your partner with a lighter mindset helped ease some anger. After a good talk, we could address the real issues at hand. Given everything we went through early on, we faced challenges around sharing and keeping things secret. While it wasn't about trust, some things could easily put either of us in a bad mood. However, one result of all this was that Diana usually wanted to stay close to me. So, we continued to seek help for years afterward. The offer from the studios was real. A TV studio picked up our story and turned it into a drama. I enjoyed the actor who played me. He was much stronger than I was, but gave off a nerdy vibe. But they really impressed me with their choice for Diana. We used the earnings from royalties each year to support domestic violence programs. We learned from our own experience that hurt can go both ways, and did our best to help those who were suffering. One Saturday morning, years later, we were planning Charlotte's 10th birthday party when Mom came in looking a little down. She had George by her side, and I noticed how close they had become. Maybe my mom and dad could start dating again. But you never know what might happen. "What's wrong, Mom? You look really sad." "Someone passed away and I'm not sure how I feel about it," she replied. "It was Roger, wasn't it?" asked Diana. Mom just nodded her head. "Mom, think about the good memories. We've all moved past the bad times. He tried to hurt us, but that only made us stronger together." "That's just it, Harry. I can't remember any good times with Roger, and that hurts. I wasted so much time. But life isn't fair," she said, repeating one of Roger's old sayings. That evening, I was lying in bed waiting for my lovely wife to come in, and when she did, she surprised me. Even after 2 kids, I still thought she was beautiful and charming. She smiled. "Well, hello there. You always amaze me, Di. How's that? After everything we've been through, the good and the bad, you still focus on me. Most people would have left, but you're still here. Do you know why, my love? My money?" She laughed. "No. My great sense of humor?" She smiled. "Nope. Then it must be my skills in bedroom." She paused for a moment. "Well, that's partly true, but no." "All right. Then why?" "Because, Harry, you never walked away when things got tough. You always came toward me, so I will always come to you too. I've never been luckier." I smiled, but then my expression changed. Life just keeps happening, good and bad. It never stops, does it? Is this because of the news about Roger? I suppose. From being a kid to meeting you, starting the company, and everything around Charlie's birth. Roger was a part of all that. I hated him, yet there's a part of me that wished he cared, that he could show me some fatherly love, and now he's gone. Don't think that way. He was nothing compared to you. You outperformed him in every challenge he threw your way. You not only won, but flourished. And unlike him, you got the girl. When your wife says you're right, it's best to agree, especially when she spends the next hour showing you just how much she appreciates you. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.